Hello, and welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's guests are Wokal, Distance, and James Lindsay, which can be found on Twitter as Conceptual James, and Wokal, W-O-K-A-L, Distance. In this conversation, we talk about the ways in which wokeness and the activist contingent of the left are operating now, how they might operate in the future, and things that we can do about that. Where will we go from here with a Biden presidency? I'm trying not to edit this. With a Biden presidency, where are we? Where are we going to go? And what is necessary to get there? This is a very wide-ranging conversation, over 3 hours long. I'm going to make one edit on it and post it. So do listen to the whole thing if you have to in chunks, because we are very hunky, chunky guys. And I know you're going to love it. And here you go. Here is James Lindsay and Wokal Distance. Yeah, you do. Is it one of these?
Yes.
Yeah, a podcast standard.
I have the puffy head on it.
Yeah. Well, you do have a lot of
differences, actually.
You have a lot of plosives going on.
I'm very plosive.
You're like a Nancy Plosive.
I'm a Nancy Plosive.
You're the Nancy
all right,
of
you're
plosives.
fired. You're fired.
Oh man. I'm gonna miss out on all your hardcore all right cash.
How's your life going in the new regime?
Oh,
You're
Jesus.
not in prison yet.
First day, man. First day. CRT, equity, and the gender thing.
Yeah.
First day.
Let's just go full in. Like, nobody could have possibly seen any of that coming. Like, people were asking me, do you really think he'll overturn the CRT thing? And I was like, on the first day. And then people are like, can't be. I was like, all right, I'll flex that back a little bit and say first week. Nope, first hour. First hour. He got to the freaking office, signed it immediately.
Yeah. He didn't just reverse it, though. He implemented the opposite.
Yeah.
That's how the schlong swings in this great country of ours.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna swing.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I don't know. I was pretty effing dark for the last few days. I've been talking to conservatives and trying to figure out where they're at, and it's dark, man. It's dark.
Is it?
Oh yeah. They're ready for war, buddy.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Legal war we're talking about.
No.
On what basis would they go to arms?
That if you can circumvent the Constitution is null, and therefore the country is no longer a nation of laws, and therefore to default back to the Declaration of Independence, where it says in the very first paragraph that when a nation is no longer our government is no longer accountable to its people, that it is the people's duty to rein it in. This is what I tried to tell people months ago. I was like, you guys don't understand. I mean, I'm not like a conservative in myself, and I'm not like, I don't think conservatively, but I do understand that their deal is the Constitution lasts as long as the Constitution lasts, and when it doesn't, they fall back on that older order, which is if the government is illegitimate, we're going to replace it. So it's scary. I mean, I don't think it's a consensus opinion on the right, but it is a very rapidly growing one. That's why I tweeted that the sleeping giant has woken up. It's not racists. Like, these people aren't racist. That's not the problem.
No, I think one of the major jobs, aside from staving off total war, one of the major jobs for the conservatives to do is to concentrate on a multi-ethnic, play the identity politic on the level of principle, and sweep up as many multi-identities into conservative principles. Really carve out and refurbish those core principles, and make it attractive to liberals too.
Yep, I am 100% behind that project. And I am happy to pair up with conservatives who are literally willing to see me dead because of my being too liberal. to see that happen. But I'm really worried about that because there is a profoundly illiberal strain that has woke up on the right that's scary.
Okay. What would be the proper way to go about critiquing or giving egress from people who are being inspired to go in that direction? Like, how do we stave off and give people?
Man, I don't know. Yeah, that's where it's got real dark because it's like, oh man, we've got this huge intractable problem on the left, and now we're having a rapidly growing intractable problem on the right that's its mirror image. And those two people or groups want to go at each other. And then those of us who are in this kind of shrinking group in the middle are like, please no. Like,
Yeah.
remember equality and stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that the consensus position on the right is still mostly lawfare. And if lawfare starts failing, though, I think stuff's going to start getting blowed up, as
What do you
we
mean
say
by
here in the South.
lawfare?
Like taking it all to court, like suing the bejesus out of everybody.
Yeah.
But there were a bunch of cases. I didn't even know this. I was looking into it recently. Like there was a case, I forgot if it was in like Wisconsin or Michigan. It was in one of these fucking states with the election goofiness. And they apparently had filed with the court an injunction in March. Like, let's look at this stupid mail-in ballot thing before it becomes a disaster. And the courts refused to hear it until December. And then they were like, oh, it's moot. It already happened. But it's like, but we filed this 9 months ago. And the court was like, whoops. And if that kind of thing keeps happening, people are not gonna be happy. Guy who's trying to sue, a military guy trying to sue, and he's had like 6 or 7 attorneys now turn him down and say that no, straight white male is not a protected class. There's no case, even though he's been clearly mishandled, very clearly mishandled.
Wait, hold on. That's a misreading of the law. The law is states that protected class has to do with classes, not a combination thereof.
Well, I mean, he has no standing, is what the lawyers were saying. So straight wouldn't work, male wouldn't work, white wouldn't work because they're not minorities. That was in the state of Illinois. So again, this is one of those things where if these things keep slipping, eventually people are going to say, oh, we don't have redress in the courts. And that's where it gets scary.
Okay.
So like the best thing to do, of course, what you just said a minute ago about pushing to take this on in a principled fashion and to lean into principles and use that to build a powerful coalition. I just recorded a short only subs a few minutes ago about start calling, like, we're going to use this word neo-racist now. It's a new word. I know who made it up, but I probably can't tell anybody who made it up. We should start using that word a lot. We should start naming them that and start building a principled argument, basically. And then we've got to have people who are willing to do things through the courts, do as much of it as possible, because if that slips, that's the end of the game.
So with regards to the legitimacy of government, I think that the discussion needs to be no longer about the election, let that go, and be about the laws, be about the Constitution. What do you think about that?
What I think with the legitimacy of the election, there are two issues, right? One of those two issues is, are we doing something to clean up the act around that going forward? Yeah. Like there's the past election and then there are future elections. So future elections, something has to be done about those. Past elections, I would say it's that shut up about it unless you have rock solid evidence. Where there is rock solid evidence, the case should be brought. The investigation you can still do the investigation and should probably, but without evidence, shut the hell up.
Yeah. But really, the big issue, the thing that's going to really ignite the right, which is, I hope they don't take that up as a hashtag and then trace it back to me, is continued violation of the legitimacy of the Constitution, and the violation of the laws of the Constitution.
Correct. And I mean also the asymmetrical treatment. If you are giving favoritism to one side by politics and you're doing the opposite to the other side, and it's transparently clear enough that that's happening, the asymmetry will be addressed some other way. and the other ways are not going to be pretty. I mean, Sam Harris wasn't wrong back in the day when he said we have a choice between conversation and violence, and when conversation breaks down, we're going to war. He wasn't wrong when he said that. Conversation is breaking down, and there's a reason for that. That's not just conservatives are stubborn or whatever. It's, there's a profound asymmetry happening here.
Yeah. And it's not just on social media. It's within the law.
Correct.
It's in the courts.
Correct. You're having courts not hearing cases and things like that. That's really going to make people mad. Yeah. And then nobody's trying to do anything to create balance within social media. And so then it's like, oh, well, fine. We'll make our own platforms. We'll go through the trouble. We'll see what that does. We don't think it's a good idea. We'll do it anyway. And then you see servers getting nuked. And it's like, whoa, okay. Like, these are big issues for people on the right. Like, oh, wow, they really are trying to silence us.
Yeah. And not just on college freaking campuses.
Yeah, not just at the Evergreen State College. I still remember when that first broke, by the way. I still remember when that first broke, people that I truly respected saying things. These are left liberal people saying things like that campus deserved it. That campus was a stupid far left experimental college and it deserved it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no, like, no.
That damn canary. I
hate the canary for dying. And then, it's like Evergreen admittedly is a weird place, but man, it created The Simpsons. What are you talking about?
That's true. It created Benjamin Boyce as well. Brett Weinstein.
Oh yeah, Brett's great. I don't know who that other guy is. Who'd you mention?
People call him Ben for some freaking reason.
I heard that there's a Ben voice. I've never heard of this Benjamin. That's the problem. I heard that Ben dresses in normal clothing and that Benjamin does things like wears velour robes.
I'm just trying to fit in with Wokal, man.
Yeah, Wokal's over here ready to go like Obi-Wan on us. There we go.
There we go.
Well, I got my prop. I got a prop too.
Okay, good.
And since I tweeted about it on the twitter.com earlier, it's true. I did give up on therapy and start training myself to fight with axes.
That's awesome. 1 second. Oh, that's gorgeous.
Hey, Wokal, we got some major issues with your audio. James. Wait, this is for practicing throwing, or are you just going to start zombie hatching?
Hacking. Okay. Got some major issues with what?
Your audio is failing.
You're a little janky. That's a very festive background.
James is white, I'm black, and Wokal's the yokel with all the flashing lights.
Don't tempt him to make them flash. I don't need an epileptic fit here.
Actually, yeah, I would have to put a warning in front of that and everything.
Well, what about this?
I would like more. It's not really changing at all, but I can fix it in post. As long as you guys don't talk too much over each other. But if you do, then what's going to happen.
Fighting.
Oh yeah, what are we going to do here?
Yeah, what are we going to do?
This.
Oh wait, before we
this
start.
Estuary of the minds.
Before we start, I have to say something to James. When you and I first connected years ago, 2 years. It'd been 2 years ago now when I popped into your DMs, because you had, I think you were under 10,000 followers at the time.
Yeah.
When I jumped in, and I was
you were like Yak of Spades at the time or something.
Yes, that's right. I was Yak of Spades. That's correct. That's a really good memory. I don't think that account exists anymore. It might. I mean, because I sometimes have two accounts when I talk to you, right? Because I have the private account and I have the public account. I have to say that I really appreciate you, because
thanks.
Bro hug.
I tell people that you fertilize, how do I say it? So you
inseminate.
You fertilized. I'm like a little.
I need
seed.
an adult.
My account's like a seed. So like you fertilized me with cynical theories, and then you gave me the sunshine of retweets and likes. And
but what did he plow you with?
I definitely need an adult.
How? Oh, that would you put with Benjamin Boyce. But in all honesty, I have had in my life a lot of of times where I've come across, because I mean, you and I talked about this. I was an old school. I was trained to be an apologist, and I had a lot of people who were in the quote unquote apologetics community who, when I screamed about postmodernism, couldn't be bothered. And then along comes the guy who says, you know, the one at one time firebrand atheist who comes along and says, if you'll fight this battle with me, yes. And that is more Christ-like than a lot of my friends who are Christians.
That happens. I hear this a lot actually now.
So I just wanted to say that I thank you, I appreciate you, and I want to let's fix this.
Unlike Donald Trump, I do not hang out with prostitutes or tax collectors, though. I did do a podcast with a porn star recently. That was cool.
Yeah, I did one with an OnlyFans star, but you haven't spoken to any tax professionals yet?
I mean, we have a CPA.
Okay. But he's not in the political sphere.
My mom actually is a tax professional too.
Go. So you do people's moms, and your mom does people's taxes.
You've got it.
That's a family to go down for the ages.
Yeah.
Well, going down can mean.
Oh, here it goes.
Here we go. What do you guys want to cover? Do we want to cover the ascendancy of the Baidong?
Baidong.
Let Baidongs be Baidongs?
That's what everybody wants to hear about. Like, how woke is this going to get? And how relevant is it? People also want to know what to do, which depends on what's happening, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's a good direction to go in. My own feeling here is, given that you have the two of us, it might be. I think it would be wise if we'll adopt an inverse Boghossian, where
is that a wrestling move?
An inverse Boghossian is where I James when I say things, James has the right to set right if I've missed something, and to be my conscience of sorts.
What's the forward Boghossian then?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a Boghossian would be if I was to just say, well, why don't you take it, James? And then James would
Oh, yeah. Pete sets me up a lot. And then he has a really good skill at setting people up so that it looks like he knows what the other person's saying, when even if he doesn't know what the other person is saying.
Yeah. So that's why I said inverse Boghossian, because instead of me saying, well, you know what I think, well, I'll let James handle this one. We'll do the opposite of that.
I even had people send me emails about that, and they're like, Pete is so generous with his grad student, letting him speak. And I'm like, shit.
Yeah. So I just want, but I have to come back to this, because I'm just like, my whole life now, because I'm working with Counterweight now, right? And I'm writing a book about this. And all of that is because of the stuff that you and I were able to do when I was able to sit in my office while I was working and I didn't have stuff, and just pour through things and have someone point here, point here, point here. Yes, Mike, you know it's postmodernism, but it's changed since 1993. Okay, well, what does it do? Well, look here, look here, look here. And then I can go, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was massive. That was massively important, because now I can be a weapon.
You are a weapon. Your threads are badass.
I'm doing.
Can we give an overture
project soon
to counter? Can we describe what Counterweight is? Because I am being enlisted into that.
It hasn't launched entirely yet, but Counterweight is an organization. So that's Helen's project, and where New Discourse is explanatory to the general public. Counterweight's going to have a little bit of that, but it's going to be geared toward helping people who have wokeness in their organization say, okay, you've got wokeness. We have to diagnose how woke you are. We have to diagnose your wokeness. And then we have to figure out how deep the wokeness goes, and then what can we do about it. So that's why I have this book here.
Beautiful Trouble.
Yummy.
Yeah.
Is that like educating to transgress for the modern anti-wokist?
Oh, Beautiful Trouble is the tactics Bible or one of the tactics Bibles of the postmodern protest movement.
Oh, great.
That's right. That's how the Antifa does its thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, revenge. against Biden.
Which is why it was so interesting to hear them say "good trouble," describing the protests. So, like, you hear literally people like Kamala Harris saying, "Oh, these protests are good trouble," and it's like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah. Good trouble. Yeah, that comes from John Lewis. That's where the term beautiful came from, because what they wanted to do was take good trouble, that old school kind of 60s protest model of creating a problem, and turn that into something that was artistic in a certain sense. And there is an art to it, but it's also absolutely ruthless, and they use a lot of dishonest tactics when they're doing things. A lot of framing, a lot of doing the media's work for them, making things look like they aren't. It's ruthlessly effective. It's power games to the max, and they play for keeps.
And how did the Capitol instigators fail in whatever they were doing, comparatively to how well this?
I will tell you exactly how that went. Cori Bush put out a piece of legislation the day of or the day after, where she said, well, we're going to get there. It was the day after where she said we have to punish. She put out a tweet. We cannot allow these people to do this, the Capitol insurrection, but it was dated, James is right, it was dated for the day before. So I think my own suggestion here is that Cori Bush comes out of the protest movement. That was where she got her start in community organizing. And those people know and understand that protests of any kind have a propensity to turn violent, right? It's part of having a bunch of people who are really upset and are feeling aggrieved and want some action. To get them together and march together requires a certain level of upsetness and sometimes anger. And that anger can be channeled for good, but it can also get out of hand when you have a bunch of people who are really up and really at it and really going for it. And when they organize their marches, they will very often have a number of people to serve functionally as, I guess you could call them lieutenants, or as security, or as guides for the protesters to make sure that nobody gets entirely out of hand. Sometimes you'll see them wearing vests. Sometimes you'll see them wearing like rally T-shirts, and they'll be kind of directing traffic and making sure things don't get too far out of hand. The people who were putting together the Trump rally, I don't think understood how this works. And I think that they ended up in a situation where that rally was going to get out of hand because everyone was so ginned up and like pushed to the max, and they didn't have the necessary protest infrastructure to make sure it was safe. So there's a video, I think it's of Alex Jones. It's somebody with a megaphone saying, "We need to be peaceful. We need to be peaceful. We need to be peaceful." There's another one of a guy in a MAGA hat yelling at the police, "You're going to need more people. There's not enough here," because there was nobody who was in charge from within the protest, who has been elevated from within the protest to have that authority from within the group to be able to say, "We need to slow down. We need to stop this, guys. This is not good." And for that reason, things begin to just go off the handle. And so it utterly melted down. And I think that Cori Bush, knowing as she does how these movements work, I think she said, this is going to be a meltdown. We need to have something ready for if it does. I think they were – now it might have been that they were going to do that anyway. Like, that's possible. But I think she knew. I think she was holding that. I think that she was holding that and was just waiting for them to mess up. And I think that they did.
Who's Cori Bush? Quickly, for anybody who doesn't know.
She's the new squad member. She's the new representative that's supposed to be part of like the Justice Democrat squad with AOC and Tlaib and Omar and whatever. Presley's at the fourth one. She's like the fifth squad, and she's from Missouri. She's, I think, from the Ferguson district, but I'm not positive about that. She's certainly from St. Louis. So she is the newest addition to the like super radical women of color Justice Democrats wedge contingent in Congress, which, by the way, put out another call like, we did great with AOC. Just the other day I saw that we did great with AOC. We need to recruit more people who are great like that, and we'll train you to be congressmen or congresswomen, I suppose, is what they're really looking for. So that's what that is. That's a and this is what people don't understand, and I know Wokal would understand this better than like anybody. They do not appear in their public antics to be disciplined, but they're extremely disciplined. They know how to look the right amount of undisciplined so that people think that they're whack jobs, when in fact it's very coordinated, it's very strategic, and they know exactly when to pull back. They know exactly when to melt into the crowd and vanish. If it's protesters, they know exactly where it's like, I mean, AOC is not great at it. If she gets off of her script or whatever, she tends to say stupid things. But for the most part, they're very, very good at knowing exactly how far to push the envelope and then to kind of like step back to let that, the Overton window expand a little bit, and then to back up and let everybody simmer down and do it again and do it again and do it again. There's a very disciplined movement that appears to not be very disciplined. And that's partly because they have a very good strategic handler behind it, which is the guy who was a huge Bernie guy in 2015 and 16 named Zach Exley. And this guy knows what he's doing. He's extremely good. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's making sure that these things get pushed exactly right, to the right distance, which is just a little bit too far every single time, but not so far too far that people realize what's going on.
So I've heard accusations leveled against AOC, for example, of being a grifter, somebody who's just in it to gain popularity and to milk the movement for money. What's the difference between what you guys are describing and somebody who is just a grifter, somebody who's riding a certain popularity wave?
Oh, these people are true believers.
True believers in what?
Oh, okay. So when we're understanding the left protest movement, like, you need to read books like Beautiful Trouble would be one of them. That would be another one. Organizing for the Gilded Age, which I can't remember why that's by. Direct Action Protest and the Reinvention of American Radicalism by L.A. Kaufman. Black Bloc, White Riot by A.K. Thompson is another one. There's a whole list of these kinds of books that they have which teach you how to organize and create social movements. There's an entire literature of this, and it's a very large body of literature, actually, and it traces itself back. I mean, people talk about the first book being Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, but that's outdated now. That's a book that would have been, in the 60s, it would have been cutting edge. That would be like if I said, the cutting edge physics is Newton, and forgot about Einstein. Like, that's how out of date that would be. Their tactics are built around creating an image and creating optics. That's very intentional. So an example of this from our recent times would be the Wall of Moms in Portland. That was not unintentional. That was pre-planned and pre-organized. Every bit of that was pre-planned and pre-organized, right? Having people there to be able to push back and to escalate is also pre-planned. So there's a thread I did on Twitter, and maybe we can link it later. After we're done here in post, you can link it. There's a thread I did where they explain, and the guy shows how they build their shields. So they'll take like a very large, a 200-gallon industrial strength bucket. They cut the bottom off. That bottom becomes a shield, and then they cut the barrel like this, two cuts, and then you get 4 usable sections of plastic, which are fairly large, and then you surround them with foam and you put handles on them. And they had a group doing this, and they get maybe 200 or 300 of those shields, and then they get 200 or 300 signs, and the signs are made of a rough material so they can be used. And then you stick them all in a U-Haul van, and you just wait. And then when the cover of night shows up, the U-Haul pulls up, the shields get unloaded, people drive away, and it doesn't matter who gets them. The people who want them can go get them, the people who don't won't. And that's how you create a situation where when the police call to disperse, we can stick around. We can form a defensive wall. We can form a defensive line. We can keep our protest going. Your rubber bullets aren't going to do anything because we have a wall of 50 shields, right? That's all planned. As for the Overton window, That's also planned. That's also a pre-plan. I'm just going to pull it out from Beautiful Trouble where he talks about that. Let's see if I can find it here. This is just, it's too important not to read right out.
This is
right out.
Wiley digs for that. It's just so important that people understand that what's going on here is that the name of all of this activism is to create public relations that push very hard in one direction constantly. The same grift is happening when the critical race theorists show up and start calling an institution or an individual racist. What they're doing is saying, hey, you're going to do what we want, or we're going to start making a public relations nightmare for you. And it's all within. I mean, so like, kind of the godfather of this is like Edward Bernays. It's like people who know how to manipulate public perception. And that's why it's so fundamentally a postmodern thing, is that it's manipulating public perception through very dishonest tactics and creating public relations type shakedowns. And Antifa is very good at it. Black Lives Matter is very good at it. The critical race theorists are very good at it in a different way that's not as street. It's more academic and institutional and bureaucratic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's absolutely correct. And we'll just read what he says here. The various options available on an issue can be roughly plotted on a spectrum of public acceptability from unthinkable to fringe to acceptable to common sense to policy. The Overton window, named after Joseph Overton, a staffer for the center-right Mackinac Center for Public Policy, designates the range of points on the spectrum that are considered to be part of a sensible conversation within public opinion or traditional media, right? So you've got your things here. These are the things that are unthinkable here. You could never do this. And this is the things here. Well, that's just common sense, right? And that window, the window can tell you what's that. And let me try this again. The window can tell you what's in that, and that window can move to the one side, or that window can move to the other. So here's my window of sensible policy options. We can push it to here, or we can push it back, okay? So here's what he says. The important thing about the Overton window, however, is that it can be shifted to the left or to the right. The challenge for activists and advocates is to move the window in the direction of their preferred outcomes. There are two ways to do this: the long, hard way and the short, easy way. The long, hard way is to continue making your actual case persistently and persuasively until your position becomes more politically mainstream, whether it is due to the strength of the rhetoric or the short or the long-term shift in societal values. By contrast, the short, easy way is to amplify and echo the voices of those who take a position a few notches more radical than what you want. For example, if what you really want is a public health care option, coordinate and promote those pushing single payer. If the single payer approach constitutes the acceptable flank of the left discourse, then the public option looks, by comparison, like the conservative option, right? So what they do is they're literal and figurative bomb throwers, right? I say literal first because they literally have people throwing Molotov cocktails. Those people represent the radical fringe, right? And what they do is they want to amplify that enough so that that's the fringe that their ideas get compared to. And then they say, well, we're just over here, right?
With our moms.
So that's right. Yeah, with our wall of moms. We're just over here. We're not these radical agitators over here, but we're taking this sensible position here. Meanwhile, these radicals are being pushed by people who have organizing prowess, who liaise between AOC and these other people and the various people within the left movement who are organizers and politicals and those folks. And those are the people who will do the protesting. So there's two wings to it: the political wing and the social protest wing. And while the social protest wing does not get to decide policy, and the social protest wing is not going to be the people that are getting in, because, I mean, heaven forbid you think if they caught somebody, a congressperson with a shield or a Molotov cocktail, it would be a disaster. So we keep those people separate. But there's a middle group that's in between, and that would be like the Justice Democrats or Zach Exley or Sean McEulwey or whatever, those people who are taking the policy part of it and informing the rhetoric of the protesters, right? And so there's a sort of a two-pronged approach that James was talking about, where they intentionally elevate just that fringe position that's just far enough that it's not completely a turn-off, but it's something where people go, whoa, that's way too far to the left. That way the position that they want, well, that looks a lot more reasonable, right?
And barring, it doesn't seem like centrists have access to radical right rhetoric. It seems like the right, the radical or very fringe right is off limits. You can't. That, at least in public discourse, they've made it so that anything even close or adjacent to there, well, everything's adjacent to there, but we have no recourse to that. So we have to do the long, slow, hard push. Is that correct?
Yeah, they've completely, I mean, this is the logic ultimately of repressive tolerance, where we see Herbert Marcuse's essay in 65 that inspired the riots of 67 and 68, and that has been reinvigorated by the woke movement. Their underlying logic is repressive tolerance, which is why everything conservative is bad. And so you say we don't have access to the radical right. We don't have access to the center right. Well, it's all that's wiped off the table. That's already considered unacceptably radical or unacceptably old-fashioned or unacceptably in support of the status quo or unacceptably guaranteed to lead to fascism. That's the argument that Marcuse makes, is that it is absolutely going the road to fascism to accept any conservatism. Where in reality, if you look at kind of what is liberalism and what are conservatism as two kind of competing ideologies, if we look at it in terms of Overton window, liberalism is let's expand the Overton window in both directions or in all directions. What is conservatism is let's narrow the Overton window and make what's unacceptable a larger group and what is acceptable a smaller group, and probably to bend that somewhat rightward and traditionally. Whereas, again, liberalism wants to expand it and probably shift it left. The radical right, the illiberal right, in fact, we don't even have a language anymore around what it looks like. We just assume it means white supremacy or Christian nationalism or something like this, where there are actually, if you dare to open the Necronomicon and look, there's actually a robust literature of illiberal right-wing thought that is absolutely not nationalist, absolutely not racist or rooted anything in that. It is, however, very traditional values, very frequently religious in its orientation. But all of that has been very systematically removed from the table since the 1960s. It's virtually impossible to talk about anything. And so anything that would even look radical rightist, that's the closest thing we have, is a sort of like weak resurgence of the trad movement. Like, be radical, start a family, put on a dress, like cook dinner, don't worry about getting a job, honey. That kind of mentality. That's the closest thing to, and that's as far as conservative stuff goes, that's pretty tame in terms of what, really could be out there without even having to dip into racism. I mean, like you could get into straight monarchist stuff. Like, it's time to get rid of liberalism and put back a king, and off with your heads if you're a wokerati. Let's bring back the Inquisition. That kind of stuff has nothing to do with race, but they very successfully positioned anybody who's far, who even tips toward far right as automatically being racist. And they've done so very, very successfully, or automatically being fascist, and done so very successfully. Monarchy and fascism aren't the same thing. I'm not saying that they're great to live under, either one of them, but they're not the same thing. And so since the 60s, they've been very, very successful. And Marcuse's essay was very influential in that regard, at absolutely preventing the Overton window from expanding rightward and to constantly creating the conditions under which it can expand leftward, even with this very radical strategy where we have to be at least somewhat tolerant of far radical leftism and then say, well, what's a reasonable compromise with that? Nobody talks about reasonable compromises with conservatism.
Okay.
That's right.
Nobody.
I
So
agree.
you say traditional values, and like for you or for me, I think, I don't know, I'm genuinely liberal. So if somebody's like, I want to live trad life, I'm like, good for you. go be happy. If that makes you happy, that's fine. And if you, as the man, woman, or child in trad life, don't like it, then when you have the opportunity, you should bail on that. And, as an individual, you should do that. And so I don't have a problem with people wanting to do that. However, there's no vocabulary in which you can even speak about that. Immediately, it'd be like, James supports patriarchy. And no, it's I support people living the life they want to live, which is a different thing. But it's so effectively, well, you're not absolutely repudiating what would be a patriarchal order is what they would accuse me of. And therefore, I must support patriarchy as a system now. And the systemic thinking that they have enables that, because to defend somebody's right to do it as an individual is to defend a system in which it is possible to do that, and therefore the whole system is tainted. So they've been very effective with this, and that, again, it's that logic of repressive tolerance has mainstreamed, and so then it feeds into these tactics that Wokal's describing correctly, and enables the tactics to continually to push the envelope to the left, and sometimes quite far to the left, without any possibility of recourse, because you get called things that are quite regressive and that, in fact, are not accurate, but you lack vocabulary to argue back against.
Yeah, yeah. And why is a movement, broadly speaking, this entire movement, broadly speaking, not just the anti-fascists, why are they so concerned of defeating or fighting or staving off fascism, and yet in act, in word, in deed, and in tenor, they tend towards the fascistic, towards the uniform, towards the authoritarian? Where's the logic or the blind spot in them that they're, or it doesn't matter, I guess you're saying, it's just a tactic?
I mean, there is a blind spot, which is that they believe that if everybody gets onto the same page that they have, which is ultimate conformity, then what will happen is that the necessary cultural and societal conditions will have been achieved to where liberation is at hand. And then once you pass liberation, it's in kind of religious language would be once you pass the eschaton, then you're in the utopia. So their belief in that sense is very religious. It's if we can just get everybody to submit and conform, then by basically the magic of the dialectical process of history, ta-da, we end up in the utopia. And the ta-da is the part, our friend Mike Nana describes it as the scene missing. It's like you're watching a movie and then it's like scene missing, and you're watching the progress of Stalin, and then it's scene missing, and then everybody's happy and perfect, and oh my God, look at the flowers, they're so beautiful. And the wheat did learn to grow all by itself and share resources, and look, it turned into barley all by itself. Amazing. That's Lysenko biology, if you don't know what I'm talking about right there. Yeah. He believed that if you just put the wheat close, the grain seeds close enough together, they would learn to share resources and become communist grain and grow better and make bumper crops, which turned out to cause hundreds of millions of people or something, tens of millions of people to starve because massive famines followed this. It's kind of like when Mao had his campaign against the birds. I don't know if you know about Mao and the birds. It's a good story if you've never heard it.
I love that. You want to tell that?
So there was a problem in China where there were these birds like pecking all of the fruit or whatever and all of the harvest. And so Mao decided that he was going to categorize all of the native, like no native Chinese bird would do that. Only foreign birds would do it. And so he identified, I think, like 5 species of birds that are genuinely Chinese, and all the other birds are not real Chinese birds. And he put out a decree for people to go basically scare the birds. They would never be able to land and rest, and to exhaust them until they died, or to kill them outright, unless there were those 5 species. And so he had everybody kill all the birds for like a year. Like chase them around with sticks and brooms and things to scare them and clap their hands.
It's a cultural evolution.
It was. And what happened was they killed millions and millions of birds. And then the next year, it turns out the birds were eating the fruit and the grain and everything else, but they were also eating the bugs. And so the bugs decimated the crops. The bugs, one of the worst famines that he inspired was after he chased all the birds. They had people kill all the birds. It's just idiocy. It's like not knowing how things work. But then, again, the native Chinese birds wouldn't do this. So that was the kind of like patriotic, idiotic explanation he had. I don't know how in the world I got talking about Mao's birds and Stalin and scene missing. It was scene missing, right? Scene missing. We're going to scare and kill all the birds, and scene missing. We're going to have bumper harvests. Yeah. Lysenkoism. We're going to plant the grain close together.
We're going to kick all the conservatives and all the conservative adjacent people out of public discourse, and then the public discourse will be free of all the terror
not just
and
public
phobias.
Discourse. Then society will be ready to enact true liberation. Then whether it's liberation from oppression like racism, whether it's the kind that Marcuse was talking about, like libidinal, you almost get like creepy crawly libidinal liberation.
Just the full frontal, just mushing bodies everywhere. Is that what you're saying? Not the liberation from the libido, but the liberation from the constraints on the libido.
Yeah, the constraints on the libido. Because the Frankfurt School had a strong set of beliefs that what was going on was that the Protestant work ethic in particular in Western civilization were built off of sublimating the id, sublimating those libidinal drives into productive work. So rather than having sex and fighting all day long and just indulging your hedonistic side, you instead had to like have discipline and use that discipline to create productive work. And that was just creating a miserable cycle of production and consumption. And so the idea was to liberate yourself from that. And then we could all just live free, I guess, like, high-tech chimps or something. I have no idea what the vision is. It's on the other side of seen missing. And to the point where in 1969, Marcuse wrote a very long essay called On Liberation. And in the middle of it, he's like, I don't know if man is biologically suited for liberation. So we have to change man biologically to make him suited for liberation. Yeah, it's like, it starts out funny.
It's kind of happening right now.
We've heard this before somewhere. Luckily, the way they're doing it now is that like nobody's allowed to have sex unless it's gay sex. And then all the future, as Titania McGrath pointed out, all the future generations will thank us for that.
I know Andrew Doyle at least will thank us for that.
I think there's something here to be said. The analogy I like to say is that there's a ratchet, but the ratchet always moves to the left. So the way that they operate, or part of the way that they operate, is that once a position becomes a conservative position, is once it's outside the Overton window, it's now lumped in with disgusting, horrible, awful. It is the worst possible kind of belief that you could have. And they don't do this. So a nice way to think about this is to say, what's a nice way to put this? Every time a conservative opinion is uttered, it's a dog whistle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So every a good example of that would be if a woman and a man and a woman decide together that they want to have traditional life, traditional marriage, then automatically not only is that misogyny and patriarchy and internalized misogyny and patriarchy, but also he probably abuses her and beats her and every other thing that you could possibly imagine as well. And it's just a dog whistle for wanting to control women and beat women and have women as sex slaves and barefoot and pregnant. It's like it's once what he's saying, you're totally right. I've not seen this before. Once it crosses outside of the range of acceptable opinion, it goes all the way in the far dumpster.
That's right. So I think, how do I put this? And then every leftist opinion is viewed as they're trying to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're just trying to help, right? So this is the question that I
Or they're crying out in pain, or there's a manifestation of authentic feeling.
Yeah, so ask yourself, here's a little puzzle. Why is it acceptable for someone to walk around with a flag of the USSR? I have a picture online. We can find this also later in post. Well, there's a line of Antifa, and they all have the hammer sickle on their helmets of the Soviet Union. This was a place that murdered in excess of 20 million people.
Yeah, and they're shouting "Death to America!"
They're allowed to walk around with that flag, or the Andy Warhol. People say you have a picture of Mao. Yeah, well, it's a Warhol, right? Can you imagine the outrage if let's say there was a very famous artist who depicted, who would be the right-wing equivalent of Mao, I guess Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
And did a really, technicolor version of that. That would be considered to be gross, disgusting, horrible, awful. But when it's Mao, it's like, right? It is not grounds for removal from society to defend Stalin. That is acceptable. That's where they ask for free speech. it is outside the pale to speak about Hitler in a positive way.
Or
Now,
even Franco, for example.
I hate my family is ethnically Jewish. I hate Adolf Hitler, and I think it should be outside the pale to defend Adolf Hitler. I think that's disgusting. I also think it should be outside the pale to be defending Stalin. But one of those is outside the pale and one is not. And that is years and years and years of work put in to make that the case, of ratcheting to the left. I'm going to lose my headphones here in a second. So.
I don't think that there's any more explicit, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I have to say it. There's no more explicit concretization of this principle than 2020 going up in flames for months on end towards one direction, apologize minimized, justified, even AOC saying they're hungry, that's where they're stealing Gucci purses because they want bread. And then one day, I know it was the Capitol building, I know I'm not excusing it at all, but one day, 6 hours, 8 hours of storming and getting out of hand in a different direction. And those two things, even mentioning those two things, most even centrist, liberal thinking people are like, that is a false equivalency. People aren't able to even put those two things even side by side because one is a threat to democracy itself. The other is just kids getting their yayas out and chanting death to America. And, but and then taking over state capitals.
It's really funny because I didn't know which one of the two you meant when you said one's a threat to democracy. I thought you were talking about the ones all summer. Whoops, my bad.
Well, which one is? Are they not both the threats to civic order?
Of course they are. But as somebody I talked to over the weekend, somebody said, and I was really taken by this quote, that everybody's calling the thing not to get lost in the Capitol, but I love this. The guy said everybody wants to call it an insurrection, everybody wants to call it a coup attempt, everybody we're insurgents and all these like hardcore military words. The guy was like, insurrection. It was 7 orders of magnitude too stupid to be an insurrection attempt. They walk in, they have no plan. They're being interviewed on camera. What's your plan? And the guy's like, I don't know. We're like just kind of walking around. That's not a serious attempt. But here's a good example I wanted to bring up. I saw this earlier. Camille Foster, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's got a cool show called The Fifth Column. He's in New York City. He tweeted an example from the New York Times, and he said, if you drench the coverage, and this is Camille's words, if you drench the coverage in carefully constructed euphemism, it hardly seems newsworthy at all, and everything is just fine. And he holds up, I'll try to show the camera in a second. He holds up the picture with the headline, right? And it's from Portland, and it says, it shows Antifa carrying a sign that says, we don't want Biden, we want revenge, with an assault rifle in the middle and some of their other iconography. And then the headline is, protesters call for more radical change. We'll see if we can make this visible. Probably not. Yeah, I can see.
You got it. Good work.
So the headline is, protesters call for more radical change alongside that. And so this is the kind of thing that the Wokal's talking about.
More radical change having to do with an assault rifle against the president of the United States?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the New York Times that did that.
Yep.
That's Times that did that.
Yep.
And so when you frame everything left wing as like it's just kind of normal and okay, or they're just trying to feed their family by stealing a flat screen TV from Target that they're going to burn down later. And then you frame like, I don't know if I want to work this year, so my husband's going to take care of me. Oh my God, is spousal abuse. Turn it up to 11 of the most horrible patriarchal, misogynist thing you can imagine. You've got a radically asymmetric playing field on which to play. And for some reason that I don't even fully understand anymore, our sensibilities are such that we can't figure out how to like grasp this thing, because we generally, I think, believe that progress is good. So clearly that which is on the side of calling for progress, rather than, hey, maybe don't break everything, seems more reasonable or fair-minded or whatever. And, again, if you attach it to causes like, oh, they just want to end racism, or they just want to stop the abuse of women, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're not going to see any abuse of women, I'm sure, off of this decision that the president, new president did in, 5 minutes after being put in office with this whole like trans policy that he's put in now. No, that's progress. In fact, I saw there's another thread I retweeted earlier today where somebody's just going after me and making fun of me and Abigail Stryer. And she's like, these people don't, I just finally realized they don't matter because they don't care about progress. And it's like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So radicalism gets equated with progress, and liberalism, which actually creates stable progress, gets equated with not just status quo, but dog whistles for wanting to beat your wife and be a racist and have slaves. And they're somehow effective at making people believe this, which I think is just astonishing, to be honest with you. But they're very good at it. They're very, very good at it. And luckily we have an expert in why they're good at it with us here, because I don't even understand that aspect.
Give me a second. I gotta use the facilities real quick here. Sorry, boys.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's just you and me then, Benjamin Boyce.
Oh, you know me, after all.
I do know you. I did call you Ben that one time. I didn't realize. I do have a friend who has a strict rule that you should never shorten somebody's name for them.
Okay, yeah.
And so as soon as you called me out, rightly so, I thought of my friend and I felt tremendous guilt.
Oh, I think a lot of people will be, this clip will likely be taken out of context, and you can have an apology whenever you cross the line. Like I
apologize to individuals. I don't apologize to groups. Like if there was like the Benjamin Boyce Action Coalition of Portland, America, I would be like, fuck you. It's bent. Get bent. And they would have to deal with it. But it's you. So
yeah, it's just me. I'm
sorry,
fine. Yeah, that's okay. We roll with it, and it always gives me an opportunity to plug that clever video that I have for just those occasions. I liked what you said about. We can get into this when Wokal gets back, but he's probably got more tactics to go through, and to build up the argument. But I think ultimately in this conversation, I'd like to get to a definition of liberalism as stable progress and the likelihood that Biden might be virtue signaling and actually implementing that, as opposed to the nature of what we're discussing here, of wokeness going in and infiltrating.
See, I don't even think the guy's virtue signaling. Everybody's saying he's virtue signaling. I don't think he's virtue signaling. I think he's paying back favors.
Okay. For what? I mean, the wokeness...
For helping getting him elected. Like Stacey Abrams.
Such a tiny...
Stacey Abrams went ape shit in Georgia, and Georgia turned blue. And whether that's through totally legitimate or somewhat illegitimate or really illegitimate means, I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
But Stacey Abrams went ape shit for the get out the vote effort, and it worked. And he owes favors to these people.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty well convinced there's not a lot of there with the dude at this point. I don't know if you saw the Salute the Marines video earlier. I don't know what that's about, but
is there another video?
He's walking and somebody in the earpiece apparently says salute the Marines as he walks by some Marines at the door, and he just mutters salute the Marines and his arms don't move. It's like, oh no.
I find it so obviously grooming that in every shot possible, Camilla's right there. She's right there. She's the president in our minds. Like we're getting ready for her being the president.
I'm trying to figure out the subliminal messaging where they had the picture at the Washington Monument off in the distance, and so the Bidens are behind the bulletproof glass, and then Kamala and what's her husband's name, Greg or something, I forgot his name. They're not, and I'm like, what's there's symbolism here?
No,
like,
the best part is that there's this huge phallus like right next to Kamala and her husband. Like we have the pants on in this relationship.
And then we've got Mr. and Miss Dr. Dr. Biden behind the bulletproof glass over here. What are they signaling with this? That's really weird. It's really, really weird.
Yeah.
So to pick back up on the thing that James had said before about how they pull this off, part of it is there's a couple of things. If you have to go back to like books like White's book, the Organizational Man, or The Greening of America. If you go real far back in the protest literature, and you start looking at some of that 60s and 70s, that's that sort of thing. The radical left, who are at the time, socialists, almost communists, very close, have been at this for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
They push this stuff relentlessly and have pushed it for years, right?
Yeah.
So back at that time, if you read like The Organizational Man or The Greening of America, those kinds of books, the central theme was conformity. If you looked at like the Guy Debord and the Situationist International books, people who were in that mold, all the way up until I would say maybe Naomi Klein's No Logo might have been the last great book of that lineage. It might have been. And what they're at that time saying that capitalism runs on conformity. Capitalism runs on forcing people into a certain mold, into a certain mode of being, into a certain way of life, into a certain way of thinking. And the solution to get out of the conformist trap that's locking us all down is to jam the culture. So anything that can be a symbol that can let people know that there's something else, that there's something more, that there's something different that we can go along in, anything like that is going to get you out. So, or anything that's like that can give people the idea that there's something outside of conformist mass society. You know, they believed that capitalism required conformity to run, right? So the idea of, say, wearing an earring or being a punk or dressing different, all of this stuff, smoking weed, all of that stuff is a portal to another mode of being, right? And the goal of the man is to push you down and to prevent you from achieving that
liberation.
That to prevent you from breaking through into that new reality, right? So the reason you want to smoke weed is to expand your mind, right? Right, that's what you want to do, and tune in to like turn up, tune in, and drop out, right? That's Anthony. I think that's
Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary, right?
Yeah.
That you want to get outside of the society, and the way to signal to people to do that is to do something like to jam the culture, right? That's what you want to do. You want to graffiti, street art, that kind of stuff. That was the lineage, right? So they were
Christmas
doing that.
lights on your wall.
Making your mom joke at Sam Harris.
Yeah, anything.
Anybody?
You did that, but they would say, way back in the day, they would have said irreverent speech and mockery and that sort of thing to just let people know, is a ticket to letting people know that, wow, there's something outside of here, right?
Yeah.
That was going all along, but there's a feedback loop that occurs, and that the ideas come from the activists, and they get up. They get picked out and pulled by the academics.
And the artists.
There's a second feedback loop where the academic ideas are plucked and pulled by the activists. So there's this kind of weird back and forth where the activists have a very academic sort of language, and the academics have a really activist-y spirit to them. And they're pushing themselves in that direction. So this back and forth has been going on a long time. Yeah. And so the activists have been molded and created with this in mind. So there's a section in Beautiful Trouble called Do the Media's Work for Them, right? Where they talk about how to get the media into position. So you might create a small scuffle over here, you get all the media over there, and then once you've done that, you can have your scene. You can have your person come out to give them the thing that they're looking for, the flashpoint that they're looking for, that moment that they're looking for. A beautiful example of this is, remember the naked woman who walked out in Portland and stood there in front of the cops and stole the show for just a moment and then disappeared back into the crowd? Yeah, that was somebody seeing an opportunity and grabbing it. Because they know how to do this, right? They're like, here's an opportunity for me to make a point. They just see the opportunity and they know to go for it. That's the same thing with the gentleman with the Covington kids, right? Taking his drum and marching towards them and then getting in a standoff with them. right? That guy's a trained activist. He knows how to do that, but you notice he didn't lose his cool. He didn't push back. He just kept banging his drum and kept signaling, right?
Yeah.
He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how not to make himself look bad. He knows how to create the optics that make them look bad. And I mean, the media just jumped on that, right? So they've got a lot of skill and have been training for a long time with academic help on how to ratchet society to the left.
Is it possible and is it advisable that people do it in the opposite direction?
That's what I was about to say. Actually, this is something. Now, I don't know about manipulating the media. I'm not good at manipulating the media. What I have recognized, however, in general, especially with the activists with the drum, what you have in that situation is, I don't know, I know Wokal would be able to talk about this in great detail, but the goal is to create what's called a decision dilemma, where the person who's being agitated either has to put it frankly, cuck themselves by doing nothing and they look weak, so they lose moral authority and standing, or they have to overreact. So you do that by what's called mid-level violence in their literature. So you're just irritating enough, so you're poking people, or you're pushing them, or you're right in their face, or you're making noise, or you're making something stink right in front of them, but you don't actually touch them or something like that. You don't actually hit them. And so the goal is to get them to overreact, and ideally with the media watching them overreact. So then you have your 10-second out of context media clip that's going to move the ball for you. And so this decision dilemma, do you cuck yourself and look weak, or do you overreact and look bad, is what they're trying to put you in. And what I found is, at least rhetorically, you can turn this back around on them much more easily than people think. The trick is to not play their game and to just very steadfastly not play their game. So I was talking with somebody the other day. He gave me this question. He says, well, somebody comes up to me and drops one of these typical woke manipulations on me. Don't you think that's a little bit racist, or don't, whatever it is. I do this on Twitter all the time, by the way. And then the reply is, that manipulation doesn't work on me. And then you don't do anything else. Or if you run a business and they come after you, they're like, so-and-so's business is racist. You just continue to do your business and ignore them. Because what happens is either they have to go away, in which case, especially if there are people watching, they end up looking stupid and weak, or they have to overreact. And by you not reacting, you flip the decision dilemma back on them. So that manipulation doesn't work on me. I have found virtually 100% of the time results in them escalating. And very quickly, it's like, fuck you, you fucking piece of shit, like lose it. And it's just glorious. And you win when that happens. Or they try, for me, it'll be like Conceptual James. They tweet that at me. And it's like, that's when I know I won. Like, okay, great. And so in many cases, this actually can be turned back on people. And if we look back to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, that they were very good at this. They were good at showing up at the lunch counter where they weren't allowed and just sitting there and letting people punch them in the head so that people could see that happening. So either the lunch counter had to give in and let them be there, which was moving the ball for them, or they were going to get this photo op of people just brutalizing them, which isn't fun for the person getting brutalized, but creates a lot of public sympathy. And it turns out that we're in a position now, those of us who are dissident to the woke hegemony, because they absolutely have hegemony, and it's now backed by, there is no Trump now. There is no empowered right wing. There's not even a Republican Senate anymore. Yes, they are absolutely empowered. And so that creates a situation where kind of you can create those decision dilemmas and become the ennobled victim. But I think actually it would require a little bit of reading and learning how to manipulate the media into position for ourselves as dissidents. I'm not saying as conservatives. I don't really think, Wokal's probably the most conservative of us, and I think he's Bernie Sanders.
We have single payer healthcare in Saskatchewan, and I worked for a government that did that, and I supported that. So I'm not a radical rightist, but James is absolutely correct. So what we need to do, really, a very good thing to do would be to break the ratchet.
Yeah.
That would be a good move, would be for us to break the ratchet. Now,
to bring that back, just for the viewer that's tuning in and out as they're doing the dishes, the ratchet is the fact at this point in time that our culture can only move towards the left, that every progressive step leftward denies everything right of that as beyond the pale or off the charts, or a dog whistle, or so on and so forth.
That's right.
Because like for the real ratchet, if you twist it one way, it moves the screw or the nut or whatever, and then when you go back the other way, it just click, and it doesn't turn the thing, and so it's like that.
I think, there's a chapter on that in Beautiful Trouble. Put your target in a decision dilemma.
Oh,
that's another book from Beautiful Trouble. There is. How do I put this? There's a very real sense in which it's taken a long time to build the ratchet. And something else that's a part of this now, which I think that a lot of people are missing, and this is going to open some people up, is that right now our bureaucracies are kind of stocked with a lot of a lot of baby boomers, older Gen X types who were really, really liberal when they were younger, met the world a little bit, and then kind of are still on that liberal-ish train, and they're seeing the new generation come up and say, man, this is what we want to see. We like these really liberal kids, and they don't realize that, like, your thing was, we want to be able, to have gay people be in relationships and not be abused. You weren't going on and saying, the fact that male and female are biological designators at all is an act of Nazism. Right? They don't realize what's coming
Nature's
up.
Eugenics.
They don't get that. They're not seeing that this is coming up. I saw a guy say on Twitter, I think it was Richard Painter, who was the chief White House counsel under George W. Bush, say critical race theory is the new bugaboo of the right wing. But let me tell you, racism is not a theory. And I thought, man, you have no idea what you're talking about. This is an entirely different method of understanding the world. Yeah. It's not racism exists, right? Like, I mean, if you had said that to them, even the critical race theorists are like, man, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But they're smart enough to take it because it shifts the culture rightward, right?
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. The idea for them is to open up the possibilities of their thing and of their ideology.
Yeah.
Another thing that they've learned is that if someone does a thing, for example, let's say they want to make, well, let's just do the trans thing. I want to be trans in sports. You just go and compete and keep going and showing up and making sure you're in and taking your spot no matter what they do. And sooner or later, people will get sick of it. And it just becomes normal, right? So now that the left holds protest marches is just normal. We just expect it. That's just a part of leftism now, is that they hold protests and marches. Right? That's just accepted. We just expect it. So that's why when Black Lives Matter is holding their rallies, the CNN people go out there and say, let's go there and see if it's really dangerous. And they say, well, look, I'm walking around here. Look, yeah, there's a fire there, but I'm not in any danger. I haven't been attacked. I haven't been hurt. Well, yeah, I mean, they're not going to come beat you with a crowbar on camera. They're not stupid.
They do that, though. I mean,
that's not.
There has been assaults of media. I mean, because things have gone way out of hand.
Right-wing media.
Yes, that's right. Okay. They pick and choose who's going to have to pay for it, right? And they're very clear about this. And I think that a lot of the people who are at the top, the CEO types, don't get two things about this. One, they don't get how far to the left it is. Mm-hmm. And two, they don't get that it can't compromise. The doctrine of complicity, and James would be the expert here, but the doctrine of complicity means you can't compromise. It's not possible.
Every inch of compromise is an inch of you siding with a status quo. So every inch of compromise you're willing to have that wasn't forced out of you by the absolute necessity of the situation was you being duplicitous against your movement. So it's a heinous sin in their faith. So compromise is right out, absolutely out. Their intention will never be to compromise. It will be to leave on the field what they absolutely cannot get. but it will never be to do so in the spirit of compromise or meeting somebody halfway, because that's absolutely antithetical to the way that their ideology operates.
And how do you break that ratchet then?
That's the question. The only thing I have found so far that works really well is, and it's not breaking the ratchet, and I trust to the ingenuity of the troublemaking class out there, but I have found that pointing at the ratchet is enough to make the woke left go berserk. They get in Wokal's next level good at pointing at the ratchet. When people see the ratchet, it doesn't take most normal people, if we can use that phrase, when they see the ratchet are like, this is BS. This is absolutely BS. And that enough people thinking it's BS will break the ratchet. But the problem is nobody sees the ratchet. So when you make the ratchet visible, when you post on Twitter, for example, CNN saying this about left wing, that about right wing, when it's, when they're basically isomorphic, or, any of these kinds of things where the bare hypocrisy, that they don't see it as hypocrisy, but the bare hypocrisy is revealed. Yeah. When you show people the ratchet, me holding up the thing with the AK-47 or whatever, and no, they just want more radicalism, or CNN putting the Chiron, Antifa seeks peace through violence. That was a real CNN Chiron.
Did they actually? They went there? They went there.
Real. Antifa seeks peace through violence.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't that ISIS? What's the difference between them and ISIS at that point? Like, it's just a caliphate. That's the
thing. When you show people the ratchet, they're like, this ratchet sucks. And then all of a sudden it starts to open up the space. And like I said, I don't know personally a lot of ways to break the ratchet, but I do know that there are some very creative devils out there.
Yeah.
Who are very good at it.
Yeah, I think
it still stays in my mind that every time somebody brought up the Capitol and compared it to just how it was covered, not even getting into the rights and wrongs of the Capitol versus 2020 riots, false equivalency and whataboutism were taken up by a lot of people who are reasonable out there. It seems like people have really bought in to it's okay to judge these things in two different ways. MAGA is
the power of know you, like you really do. Like when they I have this is you develop. People ask me all the time, how do you do what you do? Like on Twitter. And I've been in a freaking Twitter storm every day for 2 years. It's like at some point you stop caring that they're happening and you just forge ahead. And at some point they even kind of become funny. It's like, oh, I got the so-and-so's mad at me today. the Rad Femmes got really mad when that one came after me.
Aren't you sacrificing your coalition by casting yourself or allowing people to see you as somebody who's... Is that worth it? Is it worth it?
Oh, yeah.
It is.
For me, it's totally worth it. All of my Twitter behavior can be explained. Everybody's like, James lost his mind. He's like, no, I'm trying to shed the chains around my neck that keep me from being able to say the things I need to say. I have not lost my mind. It's like, oh, you're going to poo-poo me and call me not the adult in the room. Your mom's not the adult in the room. It's just like, screw you. It has to be done.
Okay, well, and... how is that actually forwarding a liberal idea, or like what's the end game there? If you're degrading all of the possible inroads that you have in building a broader coalition, which would then be able to unify around something that's really important.
I'm building a different coalition.
Okay.
So we got to talk about this for a second, because here's what we got going on. We got two things happening, and most people don't realize that two things are happening. Everybody knows that the woke at this point is a huge culture of conformity. Like they're going to eject you. They're going to cancel you. They're going to cancel you even if you're not part of their gang. But if you're in, like, the worst place to be is either right inside the woke thing near its edges or right outside those edges. Those are the people that they're really dropping napalm on. So everybody knows that's a culture of conformity. What people don't realize is that the kind of respectable so-called coalition, the intellectual dark web, if you will.
Or all the people that signed that Harper's letter.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same damn thing. But what they have is they have a culture of giving way too much of a damn about what those other people around them think. It's not illiberal to say your mom. It's illiberal to say, I want to shoot you or something because of the way you're acting. It's not illiberal to use irreverent humor. It's not illiberal to step outside of the bounds of comity, right? That's not illiberal. That, in fact, is, if we go back to my definition I gave earlier, that is expanding the range of the Overton window.
Yeah.
That's
And
liberal by definition.
If you look at what the left does, how many artists, activists have done outrageous, crazy stunts repeatedly over and over and over again until it's just like we just expect it to be weird now, right?
Yeah. You're like the liberal iced teeth.
The respectable people, the very smart people, they have the same culture of conformity, but it's having the right opinions and avoiding certain types of hypocrisy that they're obsessed with, and avoiding guilt by association with the wrong types. And that is not actually a liberal value. That is a gatekeeping value to a tight-knit community that turns out to be the perfect set of useful idiots for the woke.
How so?
Because they require people to analyze. So the woke depend upon an entire faction of high-minded liberals to give the absolute maximum amount of charity to every single one of their arguments, to assume they must always have positive motivations. And then you have this whole super liberal culture where anybody who doesn't do that is not behaving respectably. Anybody who just snaps back at them is not behaving in a respectable way. And so in some sense, what you have is that this group of very smart people who is, that's what I call them because I think it's hilarious, but the right name for them is useful idiots. Very smart, useful idiots, as a matter of fact. You have those people, they are the ones who are laundering the woke ideology into the mass acceptance by the public. And the reason they do so is the worst thing in the world to them is that some other highly respectable person in their little highly respectable clique is going to think that they're uncouth and throw them out.
Yeah.
And you don't need them. You don't need them in order to affect your end goal then.
I mean, I would love to have them, but I don't need them if the deal is going to be that every time you say the wrong word, they're going to just go after you and say that you're being unreasonable and like you're not being charitable enough. And, I don't really think Biden's a moderate. Of course, Biden's a moderate. Biden's going to be beholden to his moderate base. The moderate base that voted for him. Anybody who's arguing that is just disconnected from what's going on and is actually, I hate to say it, and I don't mean it in the kind of like complicity way, but they actually are part of the problem, which is this dynamic. They're not part of the problem in the sense that they're like actively creating the problem. They're part of the problem in the fact that they are being manipulated by a movement or an ideology that itself is very illiberal, and they are the equivalent of its money launderers without necessarily realizing they're doing it.
There's an entire woke analysis that James just gave, or similar to that, and they call what they call respectability politics. And their respectability politics is they want to be able to yell and get angry and get in your face, and if you don't like what they're saying, they say this is respectability politics, right? Yeah. It gives them the right to be uncivil. When if you say to the woke, hey, stop screaming at me, you're playing respectability politics. If a right-wing person's if you say to the right-wing person, stop screaming at me, what you're doing is you're demanding a higher standard. You're keeping them at bay, right? This is how this is viewed. I think that James's analysis is very good. They absolutely do depend on – they require the very respectable center-left liberals to treat them with respect in a way that those center-left liberals don't treat conservatives with respect.
Okay.
So here's a little.
So there's the deplorables and then the pitables.
Right. So let me put it to you this way. You guys should go check out the Twitter feed of @Redstees. His name is Stephen Miller, but he's not the Stephen Miller from
the band,
the White House, yeah,
or the band. Right.
Oh, right. Yeah. How many Stephen Millers are there?
Island.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking of like isn't the guy though that wrote like all the scary policy that looks like a sociopath that worked with Trump? His name is Stephen Miller too.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's not the Trump guy, not the band guy. Also,
I had him confused with Michael Anton for like my whole life, and now I don't have them confused.
Also, Seth Mandel is another one to look at for this.
Mm-hmm.
Esoteric CD, who is the kind of in conservative world right now, he's the only one who's got respect from, I think, everyone in conservative land would be Esoteric CD. The way that Romney was treated in 2012, I can't stress this enough. In 2012, the Republicans nominated a guy who didn't smoke, didn't drink, had never ever said a bad word in his life, and would go on to march in a BLM rally, and who did the first universal health care plan in Massachusetts. And that's who the Republicans nominated. And what did the Democrats do?
Binder full of women, whole thing. He's like,
what about your gaffes? And that became a very serious topic for a day.
Yeah.
The very same people who screamed Russia, 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 Russia about Trump were the very same people who, in the debate in 2012, or was it 2011 or was it 2012? It was 2012 it was 2011 when Romney said our biggest geopolitical foe is Russia. We're all dunking on Twitter when when Obama said the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back.
Yeah.
The way that Romney was treated, they didn't argue against him. They didn't even really smear him. And I don't mean this in the Derridian sense. I mean this in the Butlerian sense. And James can explain the difference he knows. Romney got deconstructed. That's what they did to him.
Huh.
Romney was deconstructed. Now, it wouldn't have been a deconstruction because Derrida would have said, what the hell are you talking about? But Butler would have absolutely got it. So Butler's misinterpretation of Derrida.
As in parodic, then. Butler's ultimate.
To clown him.
Yeah.
To destroy the meaning and the symbolism of Mitt Romney by clowning him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you the number of conservatives who went straight Donald Trump because they said, look at what they did to Romney. And the fact that Romney's now come back and everyone's got this strange new respect for Mitt Romney because he voted to impeach voted to impeach Trump the first time around. If he ever runs and becomes a threat to win, on a dime.
Yeah. They clown him again.
Well, as opposed to Kamala Harris, who's now the vice president of the United States, accusing Joe Biden or allowing Joe Biden or forwarding Joe Biden's accusation of being a sexual harasser. Like she leveled a very serious charge against her future running mate, and nobody brings that up. That's okay.
That's fine. They don't care. You have to understand. My point here is about why conservatives went Trump.
Yep.
The left doesn't recognize, or the media folks, because they have a laugh and a ha-ha at Mitt Romney and at the conservatives. I don't think they quite realize that there's a problem here. And the very smart people, as James called them, have to recognize this. Part of the goal of what Democrats are doing is they will very often go way harder after somebody like a Ben Sasse or a Mitt Romney because they don't want to allow a conservative to gain the stature to be able to be the adult in the room. So they have to tear them down.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's
they
why
want the moral authority. Okay.
Right. And that's why they hate Marco Rubio. The reason they hate Marco Rubio is because if Rubio ever becomes president, their demographic strategy crumbles. Because if Rubio becomes president, he's the first Hispanic president. With Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, Rubio got 48% of Hispanics in Florida, and I know that's a lot of Cubans, but it does not matter. The shift from Hispanics to the GOP is beginning. They were not. The reason it didn't happen earlier, Bush was right about the Hispanics, but he was wrong about something. What Bush was right about is that they're natural conservatives. What he was wrong about is that they're not natural neoconservatives. Big national security, austerity spending, half-hearted on social issues. We'll give you a judge, but don't embarrass us. The Bill Kristol, Lincoln Project-esque neoconservatives. That's not what they are. They're kind of populist-y conservatives. Like Rubio getting up on the I tweeted about this a while back. Rubio getting up on the Senate floor of the Florida State Senate floor and saying, guys, I just want to say, I'm happy to be here and I'm moving on to other things here, but I just want We have to remind everyone that, God doesn't care about our partisan squabbles. Well, God cares about everyone. But, well, you guys know what I mean. Like that kind of off-the-cuff kind of populist-y sentiment. And if Rubio gets the nomination ever, Joy Reid once on Real Time said of Rubio, she goes, "Oh, you think Hispanics would vote for him just because his name ends in an O?" Right? Because she's got to mock him for being Hispanic, right?
Okay.
You got to be sarcastic. We have to say you're not authentically Hispanic. Rubio
You're not politically Latinx.
Not politically Hispanic.
The Latinx.
If he wants to get up and make fun of Latinx and laugh at it and go after Hispanics and he can win and Rubio wins, their demographic strategy is over. Because there's actually more Hispanics than there are any other racial group other than whites. America's not turning... Wait, this is important. America's not turning black, it's turning brown, it's Hispanics. So here's the thing. Because the left goes after those people and tries to tear down the Rubios and the Sasseys and the Romneys and those kinds of people and really go after them when they're a threat to take power, they think it's kind of funny to hollow out the GOP and turn it into the MAGA Trump Q people. Ha, 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 ha. What they don't realize is when people get sick of Democrats, who are they going to vote in? That's America's backup plan right now. And if you think that the Democrats can't lose to stupid and can't lose to crazy, if that's what the Democrats think, it might be useful to remind them that you guys got whooped by Trump.
Yeah.
And by the way, when America gets sick of you and that backlash comes and there's a favorable Senate map, watch out. And the Democrats don't have anyone like a Mitch McConnell either. They don't have someone like that. And so this is a very,
in what
very
respect?
foolish, they don't have
very,
a tactician like him.
Tactician.
They don't have a tactician. In 2013, Mitch got up on the floor of the Senate and said to Harry Reid, "You're getting the filibuster, rid of the filibuster. This will hurt you, and you will come to regret it sooner than you think." How many judges did Mitch McConnell ram through? Mm-hmm. How many? He will keep doing that. And if you see wokeness got to get rejected at the judicial level, you can thank Mitch McConnell for that. But I want people to really get a hold of this. I was never Trump because I wanted Rubio. Call me guilty. But when Trump was running, back on my old account, I said, this is people's attempt. They don't want the sort of Cato Institute, at the time NRO, sort of Lincoln Project-esque, David French-esque neoconservatism. They don't want that. They absolutely are aghast at the Iraq War. Absolutely aghast at that. And a lot of Republicans are aghast at that because a lot of the army is Republican and nobody's dad came home for 10 years. They haven't forgotten this. They're very, very – they love their military, but boy, they don't like the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. That's going to die out. But when they nominated Romney, they said, we're nominating our most respectable, best, nicest, politest man. And what the Democrats and the media did to him has not been forgotten. And you are, for the very first time, probably since Reagan, you're seeing a populist conservative resurgence. Mm-hmm. And that can be both good and bad. Mm-hmm. But I think that if the Democrats, just look at the storm they had over Donald Trump, and to think that the Democrats were only able to get a 50-50 tie in the Senate and barely hang on to a House majority, and the Republicans actually increased in the House, and they took the most Hispanic county. If the GOP is smart and they continue to move in a moderate populist direction, and they don't go back to Bushism and they don't try and go back to Reaganism because you can't put the new wine in old wineskins. I don't know who the next president will be. Nikki Haley, no. Nobody like that. But if they get...
Everybody knows who the next president will be.
Who's that?
Oh. Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah, the next Republican
47. Hang on. Hold your hats for 6 months.
For the Republicans. I don't know who that will be, but I know that they will pick somebody who's going in a populist direction because that's where the party's headed.
Yep.
And this radicalization started in 2012. Because if you look at the the two nominees before that were John McCain and Mitt Romney, and then they went Trump.
Yeah.
And they were primed to go Trump before that, but they decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to give respectableness, kind of like one more shot.
Okay.
And how was it received?
This is something that would be helpful to hash out. If you're saying, if I hear you correctly, that your argument was that the Republicans were trying to be respectable and put up their best man each time, and that man was lambasted and not treated fairly at all, so they deferred and they rallied around somebody who didn't play that game at all and smashed through that. But also, the problem with Trump on some level is that, and Holly Mathner wrote a very excellent piece about this, about the different levels of Trump's lying. There's this used Carsman cell level, and then there's the actual lies that he did. He normalized lies, but he's not only the president who lied the most, but he's the president who was lied most about in history. It seems like they picked somebody who went too far. Trump went too far. Trump destabilized a lot of public trust and inflamed us to a point of civil war. Is that a fair analysis of the way in which Trump caused other people to rile everybody up and how he riled everybody up, not just his base, but the left? To what degree did the Republicans go too far, or did conservatives go too far, and how are they going to be damaged going that far and losing hold of respectability and accepting the deplorables mantle?
So that's where it's funny for me, because, we're going to disagree on this. I don't think Trump went far enough, to be honest with you.
So I was going to put
James
this on. I was going to put this on the T for James, but I was going to say that Donald Trump is our first postmodern president.
Yes.
Right? I think we can agree that. Trump was to do two things. Trump was to kill off Trump killed off two political dynasties, the Bushes and the Clintons. That is an amazing political feat. And I'll put this on the T for James, and he can kind of hit it out of the park a little, maybe a little clearer than I can. Trump was to destroy the Republican establishment. He did that. And then he was sent to Washington to destroy the establishment, which is both the media establishment and the political establishment. Steve Bannon at CPAC said that they were going to deconstruct the administrative state. Where do people think he got that from? This is postmodernism, right? Right? This is postmodernism. Trump was undisciplined in his approach. Mm-hmm. Because Trump, everything that's coming, the media has already accepted a postmodern outlook, right? Our news media has already accepted the postmodern outlook. So they sent a postmodern president to go deal with that. And there's a scene where you can find, there's a couple of them. One where he says, I could be a president. I could be presidential. Hello, how are you, my fellow Americans? But he goes, you wouldn't want that. No. And everyone's laughing, right? He's deconstructing the social role. That's a Butlerian deconstruction, not Derrida. Derrida would have been aghast at that. Butler would have said, well, you're pushing the wrong way, you goof.
Politics of parody.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the second one is where he's in doing his presidential thing, and then they stop for a second, someone coughs, and I think it's Mick Mulvaney, and he says, excuse me, could you get out of the room, please? You can't cough during the thing. And it's like he jumps out of character, and he turns around and gets right back into it. Trump knew exactly what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But he was undisciplined.
Undisciplined.
That's right. If Trump didn't know where and when to use his because Trump's not postmodern in his outlook, because Trump hasn't read enough philosophy to have been postmodern in his outlook.
Yeah. But plus Trump he's 70-something.
And Trump got their tactics.
Yep.
So Trump was accepting the postmodernism of their tactics. The second thing that's coming up now, and maybe this is a separate question, is
because he was in the WWF Hall of Fame. That's why.
Yeah. So he knows the postmodern tactics. So maybe James can talk about that. And and he can maybe explain that better than I can, because there is a postmodernism on the right it's a nascent postmodernism that is formed on the right. I don't know if it's sustainable, but Trump was absolutely using postmodern tactics, which are effective, and that's why he got picked.
Yeah.
And what are they effective at? They're effective at tearing down hegemonic social power, which is exactly what the left had. What has everybody been saying for several years is the right has the political power. Even when Obama was president, the Mitch McConnell and his Senate basically ran the show. The right has political power, but left has cultural power. Trump, whether instinctively or for whatever reason, intuited the fact that the left had the cultural power, and that postmodernism is the best treatise in print for dealing with social power that's got out of control. So you've got hard power and you've got soft power. And there is no better analysis of soft power in print than postmodernism. And so if you want to look at it very favorably, it is telling you exactly what's going on with soft power and exactly what to do with it. And Trump was extremely good at taking those tactics and pushing back at it. And so a lot of people will remember that right before the election, it was actually very close to like less than a month before the election, I finally said, I'm voting for Trump. And then I put out a podcast called Biden's Not the Room. And I re-listened to that this morning, as a matter of fact. Kind of interesting to see. I wanted to see, like, how good was I? And I could have done better. I was actually too scared to just lean into Trump. And it's not Trump. It's not Trump. Trump the guy. It's like, whatever. That's the thing, is all these people are like, oh, Trump, blah, blah, blah. Orange Man. It's not about Orange Man. It's about what he was doing to deconstruct this hegemonic power. And that actually, I have now concluded, that didn't go nearly far enough. You say, oh, it's to the brink of civil war. No. That was brewing anyway. And so what I said at the time in October,
civil wars, which means the ostracization of the right, the delegitimization of those voices.
Oh yeah,
is increasing. It's not really, it has anything to do with Trump.
All he did was accelerate what was already happening and make it visible sooner, possibly before the trap snapped shut. And he also created a circumstance in which people can see that, and this is what I was about to get to. I said at the time that if the situation was normal, I would unequivocally support Biden over Trump. But it's not whether or not Trump's normal. And it's not even that much about Biden. The title of it was Biden's Not the Room. It's that the world isn't normal now. We are out of normal logic. And so if we do live, in fact, in post-modernity, a postmodern president is the necessary remedy to that. And ideally, you would have one who's disciplined enough and who, like Trump, didn't govern like a raging right-winger. The fear is that you're going to get somebody in there who understands postmodern tactics who's a raging right-winger. What you want is somebody like Trump. If you listen to most conservatives about Trump, he's like, he governed like a Democrat. Yeah, he actually kind of did. But no new wars, lots of this kind of populist sentiment. What I see is that the virus, for a very long time, and I don't want to say it's always been, I think we've all forgotten who shot first, and it doesn't really matter at this point. But the virus for a very long time is that normal has been really bad. Normal has been screwed up, whether that's the result of people like Newt Gingrich and his conservative movement with a capital C, capital M, started in 1971, whether that's the result of the Reagan era and neoconservatism, which was really the natural extension of what Gingrich started, whether that's because of the radicals in the 1960s like Marcuse and the cultural Marxists and all of this crap, the new left. I don't know. I don't know who shot first. I don't know if we can even tell who shot first anymore. All I do know is that normal is, like, we've lived for at least a decade under a largely functionally one-party oligarchical system. Normal is not what we want to go back to. Back to normal is back to bad. And so what I see is that the virus, we can say that woke is like the current manifestation of that virus, but the virus has already been loose. And Trump initiated the immune response. I actually tend to, and I know a lot of people think this is hippies or whatever, but there's scholarly literature on it. I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm going to keep doing it because it's worked out for me quite well. And it's harmless if I'm wrong. I usually, if I get sick, take tincture of elderberry. And the this sounds stupid that I bring this up, but the mechanism of action, if you take tincture of elderberry, Sambucus nigra, if you take that when you first start to have viral symptoms, there's something about the way that your immune system interacts with viruses that causes them to release certain cytokines, and the presence of elderberry extract increases the amount of cytokines that you release, which means if you have full-blown flu and you take elderberry, you can probably kill yourself with cytokine storm because, for example, your TNF-alpha rates can come up to as much as 56 times as many as you are releasing otherwise. So for me, Trump initiated, he's like taking elderberry at the moment of disease, and he initiated, I tweeted this earlier today, and I got some praise that it was a good analogy. I've been saying it for a while. He initiated a cytokine storm that everybody thinks is the disease. When you get the flu and you feel really bad, the flu is what's making you, is your disease. But what makes you feel like you're going to die and it would be okay if that you did is the cytokines. It's a cytokine storm. That's what gives you the fever. That's what gives you the body aches. That's what gives you all of that disaster that you're feeling.
Literally shaking.
That's literally what kills you also. Yeah. And it's also with COVID-19. One of the things that most of the people who die of COVID-19, if they die properly of that and not pneumonia that sets in after, they die of a cytokine storm. And it was a big concern. There was a lot of people talking about that early on in the pandemic. And so cytokine storms are dangerous. And my interpretation is in fact that Trump is the cytokine storm. And the virus is something else. It's this left cultural milieu that we're in. And so I don't think, the question is, did he burn out the virus far enough, or is the virus still going to be able to kill us? So in some sense, I don't think Trump went far enough, and it's because he's not disciplined. It's because he's off the rails.
Yeah. Hold on, let me see if I can find this.
I worry about waking people up to, yeah. Well, okay, it's important for me not to be worried and not to be anxious and to return to first principles and to be very principled from here on out, have very sure footing and speak to my values and return to those. What I worry about is that people are so caught up in their hatred of Trump.
Yeah.
How do you break them out of that? Does that even matter? And I think it does, because I am of the mind that building a coalition of respectable people, of people across identities and across even a range of values, from liberal to conservative, or from authoritarian to liberal, culturally and economically. That is what will save us. And returning to a place, artfully returning to a place where we can diagnose. And this is probably the point of the conversation, or where we need to go with the conversation, is diagnose to what degree is the Biden administration going to forward and allow what we call wokeness to entrench itself into our federal, state, and local governments, and to what degree can we show people exactly what's happening and why it's a bad thing? And so we have to reinvent what America is. We have to reinvent a non-postmodern or a post-postmodern conception, and even of society. And I think it even includes religion. I really do think that individuals can live without religion, but societies will invent a religion if one's not in place. And wokeness is filling that gap. So how do we go? Where do we go from here? And where's Biden going to take us?
Biden is not going to be unifying. We're going to have to unify absent Biden. And this is, like you asked me earlier, now I understand when you're asking me about coalition building with the very smart people. And my point actually would be that and I think what Wokal was talking about what they did to Romney, is you're never going to build a coalition with those people in it. They have to come to it in humility later. They are gatekeeping their own community. They're the wrong place to be building that community, that coalition. I think we're actually going to have to build, not outside of liberal, broadly classically liberal principles, but outside of the camp of respectability, is where that coalition is going to start building. And the coalition, so how do you break people out of Trump hate? You know who was doing a great job of that before they got removed from every freaking social media platform in the universe is Walk Away. Have you watched any of the videos that they put together?
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
They're brilliant. It absolutely knocks you off of your I hate everything about Trump pedestal. It becomes impossible. I did a short podcast for my little only subscribers or only subs thing earlier where I was talking about this. And there's two Trumps, or at least two Trumps. There's the Trump that's really Trump, and then there's the Trump that was created around Trump. And people hate the Trump that was created around Trump. And once they realize that that's the thing they hate, things change. So if you want to talk, how do we get to like a kind of a postmodern liberalism? The answer has to be first that people have to understand that we live in postmodernism and it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be any let's go back. There has to be recognize the moment for what it is and let's move forward. And the truth is that so long, like I said, that I think that Trump was the right president because he's postmodern in postmodernism. He was the wrong president because of a variety of personality defects and his lack of discipline. I don't think he did the inflaming. I think the inflaming happened around him and he played into it and increased it. But that's the name of that game. That's the acceleration game that you have to play with the postmodern condition until people see that that's what red pilling is, seeing the Matrix. Baudrillard is the one who described what we understand to be the Matrix. The simulacra is the name of the book. And to get past it, people have to see it and then realize that it sucks. And to see it and realize that it sucks, they have to realize things like what Weinstein's been talking about, is that there's been a gated institutional narrative. And that gated institutional narrative is selling, at this point, it's no longer even a gated institutional narrative. It's that plus selling hysteria to keep itself empowered. And so the purveyors of postmodernism also have to be exposed and identified. I will tell you, the most transformative thing that I've ever seen is the walkaway video they did about Trump and the disabled reporter. I don't know if you've seen this. Or, you know,
no, I haven't.
So you know what I'm talking about, right? The guy with palsy, and Trump was like, you know, and everybody was like, oh my God, how could this not have ended it? And they did a video showing Trump doing that to like 30 other people. He's like, and so I asked Nancy Pelosi a hard question and she's like, and it's exactly the same thing. It's like a habit he had. And then the second it landed on somebody who had a disability, they were like, oh, that's the awful thing that he did. No, in fact, it probably would indicate that he doesn't have that prejudice because it wasn't a thing that he would have even been paying attention to. And when you see things like that and it snaps you out like, oh, my God, I'm living in a simulated reality to where there's no original. I live in the simulation that I mean, we're in like level 5 simulacra turning back on itself. We live in the hyper real that he's talking about in that book.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden that offer of the red pill is very not only tempting, but you take it realizing taking the red pill doesn't turn you into a Trumper. It doesn't turn you into a right winger. It doesn't move your politics at all. What it turns you into is somebody who realizes that the propagandists in charge of our kind of information universe are full of shit. And then you become sick of that thing, left, right, or center. And that's where your coalition lives. Your coalition is left, right, and center people who have been red-pilled, who understand that what's going on is that we're being induced into hyper reality by a media, political, academic maelstrom of, as Lyotard called it, parology, which is truth by consensus, which means not truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a second here.
That's why I've kind of actually, I hate to say it this way, but because in many ways I'm still very mad at it, and I think that what they unleashed into the world is very dangerous. But I've kind of on a level fallen in love with the postmodernists. I'm like, oh shit, they're actually talking about things that are actually happening now.
I won!
But the problem is that they go too far.
Yeah, the problem with the
people I'm not in
postmodernists,
love with are the critical theorists.
The problem with postmodernists, the postmodern theorists, is if you read the postmodern theorists as a warning, they're great.
Yep, exactly.
They are, and I had a conversation with somebody, and when I said to them, I said, the postmodernists were almost right.
That's right.
And the reason that the postmodernists were almost right is that the postmodernists were suggesting that the reality that we have right now would be a good one. Right? Postmodernists were suggesting that the world
They were
of
naive.
counter stories and narrative and local truth was a good one. They were suggesting that this was right. Foucault was suggesting that it was a very good idea, that it was a positive good, that we think of every truth claim as being as really being masked for power, right? They thought that this was wise. Like what Foucault did. Foucault wanted. How do I put that? I'm oversimplifying him, but Foucault wanted us to view every truth claim as, how does he put it? Constructing the field of the action of constructing the field of possibility of the action of others.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Of others.
Of
what
others,
does that mean?
Right. So
constraining putting people into a decision dilemma.
Well, no, what I'm doing is if I have the ability, let's suppose me and James decide we're going to construct truth. And the truth that me and James are going to construct is that
2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, we are going to construct.
No.
No, what's
talk about a destructive 2020 meme.
We're going to construct a reality in which you are way more likely to die from cancer if you don't have ice cream every day. We're going to construct that as a truth. And we're going to drive that into society. All of a sudden, when people believe that, their field of action, the foods that they can eat for a day, have narrowed, because at least one of those foods in their heads has got to be ice cream, or their chances of cancer are going to skyrocket, right? Mm-hmm. When you can construct what people believe is true, their field of action, those truths serve as anchors for what they can do, but also for what they're not allowed to do, right?
Yeah.
So if I tell James as his doctor, if I'm James's doctor and I say to him, you are deathly allergic to strawberries, one of the things he's no longer allowed to do, his field of action no longer includes eating strawberries, right? If you think of your level, your number of possibilities as being constructed of the things that you can possibly do according to what you believe, right? If you think of your field of action as being a brick road, right? And each of the truths is a brick in that road. If I get to decide the brick, I get to build your path.
Yeah.
I get to build what paths you have. And
I
where
love
those
watching
paths
normal
go.
people learn postmodernism.
You like watching what?
Watching normal people learn postmodernism. I'm watching Benjamin's face as this is happening.
What's happening?
No, I have a counter argument to that.
Oh no.
Darth Wokal.
Darth Wokal has come out.
No, it's basically what's happening.
James.
What you're seeing right now is this is in 2018 when I first DM'd James, that was like Darth Vader. No, and some people saying we're in postmodernism. Gren's predicted it. I thought it wasn't here. Okay.
Yeah, it's
so
bad.
when you have that, you can control the field of others, right? And so
Yes.
the idea, Foucault thought that this was just how it all worked. That those truths could be, as long as you didn't run aground of the ungraspable reality and kill yourself, that reality, the possibilities of reality are so wide that you can basically mold onto it anything that you want. Right? So it's not that he believed they weren't ontological relativists. They were epistemological relativists of a certain kind and anti-realists, right? Mm-hmm. And they thought, as Sandra Harding, the standpoint theorist, has said, that the goal of any epistemology is the practices that it legitimizes. Truth's not on the table, right? She doesn't think it's on the table. She's ejected that from the game. And she's clear about this. She actually says, in one of her essays, she says that the goal of an epistemology, the goal of any standpoint practice is the practices of which it legitimates and not truth, right? So the postmodernists thought this was a good idea. They thought this is just how this worked. And they thought now that we know how this has worked, we don't have to listen to what those oppressors say about truth. We can just build it within our own community, right? And so I say they were almost right because they said this is what we're going to do, and this is in fact what we should do. Now that we've done it, it's a terrible idea. But by reading them, you can understand what they were saying, what they were believing, and the thing that they were pushing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that to go back to my statement earlier about needing some sort of religion, some sort of validating a network of narratives and practices and beliefs, axioms and principles and morals that can house enough flexibility for the range of liberal thought, but enough unity. There has to be some sort of religion of liberalism. Classical liberalism, intellectualism, reasonableness is not going to satisfy the drive for overcoming guilt, for the need to experience communal worship of something, to come together in some sort of way that is transcendent. I think that postmodern steps saying this is arbitrary to a certain degree, but we can tie all of these decisions that we've made, all these stories that we've made, these heroic arcs, these celebrations that we have of identity and communal celebration or patriotism, we can tie it reasonably down to something that's anchored in truth so that the atheist and the free thinker can examine the validity of all these bricks. But you still have to build a road. And that road is still more or less arbitrary and should be played with to a certain degree.
Well, I mean, I do think that what we used to have and what people aren't, like everybody says, oh, well, the decline of Christianity. And I think there's some validity to that, but not much validity to that. Some, but not much, right? Because what we had until quite recently, 50 years, was, and we certainly had this to a significant degree when I was a child in the 80s. We had a religion of Americanism, and I know you're Canadian, Wokal, but you understand. Your Southern brethren had definitely a very, like, it means something to be American, and it probably had something to do with a Dodge Ram and doing donuts in a field or something. But nevertheless, we had actually these kind of ties that bound us within Americanism, and what the critical theorists have very successfully targeted and undermined. You could have a very postmodern Americanism. It has room for that. But what you can't have is a critical Americanism, because it's like I don't know if you guys saw the thread I made fun of in several instantiations, like 10 of its tweets last night, this epic thread, the Bad History Takes account on Twitter, which is now suspended.
Oh.
I like to believe I had something to do with that. But anyway, the Bad History Takes...
They took the 1776 project and railed against it and made no arguments whatsoever.
Oh, I know. They started out like the first 5 or 6 tweets. First of all, just so everybody, if they don't know, because it's all gone now, but the first, like, this thing was like 70 tweets long. Like, they took the 1776 commission that Trump put out that document on like the 18th or 19th or whatever, like right at the very wire. He puts out this document saying 1776 Commission, and here's what and he names Marcuse and Gramsci as part of the problem. It's really brilliant. And progressivism, I mean, I'm like, oh wow, the Claremont Institute probably helped with this, and because they've like been studying progressivism for 40 years and philosophically. And so he does this huge thread, and the first 5 out of these like 70 tweets are like, here they try to make the case that blah blah blah, and then it's like, you stupid, insipid, idiotic, piece of shit, worthless, flag-humping, hypocritical, and then it's like just like key smashes after that. It's just completely devolves into insanity. And he's like, I wish I could find the person who, and this is probably how they got suspended. I wish I could find the person who wrote that. I couldn't even tell you what I would do with them. And I did quote tweet that one, and I was like, what are you going to do? Scream at him and say and then get shot? It's like, what are you going to do? But yeah, so this PhD student in history has this account, and he tries to take this thing apart. But the thing is one of the tweets that he has in there is that it's not possible to look, and this is a critical theory view. This is whether you want Howard Zinn, whether you want critical race theorists. This is the critical theory view. It is not possible to look at the history of the United States and be proud of being an American, is what he says. That's horseshit. That is not compatible with the Americanist religion, the civic religion of being American and believing in American values, which I can tell you people around the world. We saw in Hong Kong, for example, when China started cracking down on them waving U.S. flags and Union Jacks, of course, Union Jacks, but then singing the Star Spangled Banner in, Chinese karaoke style. And that spirit of Americanism as kind of America was a country founded on ideas. That's what America's all about. So those ideas establish something like a religion. We hold these truths to be self-evident, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard these things. It's always been a nation founded on ideas. And then one of those ideas is it'll be a nation of laws, as we often hear. And so that religion of Americanism is whether you say that Christianity got taken apart or not, that religion, which is what actually bound the nation, was one of the things that we talked about, that ratchet has just absolutely forbidden. You're allowed to say why America sucks, and you're not allowed to be patriotic. In fact, right now, there's a push to name everybody who calls himself a patriot a domestic terrorist. The ratchet is twisting hard.
Wow. Wow. That's going too far.
It's way too far.
Oh,
and
stop.
Whoa.
That. In a debate with Jordan Peterson and Eric Michael Dyson, there's a moment where Peterson says, where does the left go too far? He says, we know when the right goes too far. He says the right goes too far when it starts getting into anti-Semitism and racism. And when they start going into authoritarianism. He says, and we know where that is. Where does the left go too far? And Dyson doesn't give an answer. Here's when you know the left goes too far, when they won't tell you what too far is. Because what that means is when the left is going to go too far, they take the brakes off first. The right will put brakes down because it's the right. Okay? They just naturally put boxes in, so the boxes are already there.
Yeah.
So that's why when Hitler was doing his thing, he always used to clown, right, and tell jokes. And sometimes there were Nazis who would say, well, we don't want people to even know if we're being serious. This is why you see Nick Fuentes always being a clown, always saying things and then taking them back. That's why he does this. This is Nick Fuentes doing exactly that, so that everything has to be inferred, right? Nothing can ever be spoken directly, right, which is very postmodern.
You'll notice that I don't do that. I clown, but I don't do that.
That's right, because James is speaking exactly what he wants. When the left goes too far, you say, well, how far would be too far for you? Tell me exactly what the markers of being too far is. When they refuse to give you that, that's when they're about to go too far.
That's right.
When they say that we're using violence for peace.
When you say, is violence too far, and they give you an explication of why violence is happening, rather than saying, yes, it's too far. That's when the brakes are off. And right now, the brakes are off the train.
And that's
but
exactly
not with regards to Biden. Biden's going to clamp down. I think that everything that he did on his first day is total George Bridges. All those EOs, I just read George Bridges. This is a weak president that's playing into his advisors.
Did we not say that together, Benjamin, at one point?
We have been saying that.
Did we personally, you and I, not say that Biden would be the George Bridges of America? I believe we said that together. Yeah. I know I said that to Brett on his podcast where Jesse joined me.
Yeah.
This isn't
but
point.
Biden himself is not going to be the stop or the answer or the end all be all of America. He is going to be the gloss that will allow these ideas to entrench themselves into the mechanisms of government.
That's
right.
Correct.
He's the weak and corrupt administrator that allows it to be implemented.
And the media will dress up in cheerleading outfits and talk about his cats and dogs and allow this to happen.
It's basically an 8-year break.
8?
So what conservatives will say, if you ever talk to conservatives, 8-year break, that's a throwback. What the conservatives will call the Obama years is they sometimes call it the 8-year break for journalism.
Oh,
that's a common.
I just hope it's not 8 years, because that's 6 years of Kamala.
I don't know that Biden's going to get 8 years, but the 8-year break for the term, you just came back from an 8-year vacation is a common thing, and you're already seeing it now. And they're having a problem because the media ecosystem is collapsing, and they just ran out of content in a big way.
I mean, I've been saying that for a while as well, and also that one thing that Trump has done that people were aghast about, and in fact, I think, Benjamin, that you even expressed concern about this, is that he made it very, very clear that what the media is doing is not normal. Whereas before, it was like, oh, the media. And now it's like, the story about Biden's dog and the pet psychic comes out and people are like, what the hell is going on here? Whereas had there been, 4 years of Hillary Clinton in between, there would be no what the hell. That still would have been normal. Nobody would have detected it.
Yeah.
They would have.
So we have an opportunity right now
human interest story to fill fluffer. Don't worry about that. They wouldn't realize that what's actually happening here, and so the 8-year break that they took under Obama, that the conservatives would say, part of what's happening is that you're right. He is George Bridges. That is true. He absolutely is George Bridges. I would also say that there is something in Ace of Spades before he went off the rails. Actually, I don't know if he's even off the rails, but before the turn of his blog, because there was a considerable tone change. He said that when the ratchet wants to move left, he says the media will say, "Oh, nobody thinks that. Oh, nobody thinks that. Oh, nobody thinks that." Once it hits critical mass, oh, everybody knows that. Everybody thinks that. You're right, and so they explore the seams always of the conservative coalitions, and the moderate Democrat coalitions are always explored, and they kind of look and find where those seams are, and they ask wedging questions. And for example, Mitt Romney was going to be asked repeatedly what he thought about what his personal religion said about birth control, right? Hillary Clinton was never going to be asked how many genders are there. And when Biden was asked how many genders there were, he said at least 3. And then when the person kept pushing on, he said, get out here with that kid. And nobody, you don't get to do that to us. We get to do that to you. Sean McHugh talks about this. He calls it simple comment. Every time a Republican president does something wrong, please give us your opinion on that. Every Republican senator up and down at every level gets asked that question. When a Democrat does something horrible, that doesn't happen. That sort of nobody wants to be the one who puts the Republicans in charge. Nobody wants to be the one that's responsible for a Mitt Romney presidency. Yeah. That kind of attitude is going to lead them to put the happiest, smilingest face on all of this stuff. And as people begin to see it trickle down to their kids, and as it gets slowly, people are upset. And once there hits a critical mass of people being upset, that's when your backlash is going to hit.
Yeah. If you want to help make them upset, here's the question. And it's exactly into the vein that Wokal just busted out, which is, so we have immediately that Biden rescinded the critical race theory executive order that Trump put out in September.
Which wasn't even about critical theory. It was about
It
making
11
government
that you can't
non-sexist, non-racist.
Sex and race. It had no race scapegoating, no race discrimination, no sex and race scapegoating, discrimination, stereotyping, naming the country as evil. There are 11 things that are named that you can't do, specifically in Section 2. It does not ban teaching diversity training. It does not ban teaching critical race theory, as we heard the lies. That's Section 10. You can read it for yourself. I put an article on New Discourses where you can read both of those sections for yourself and see. And so Biden Biden did rescind that executive order. So by direct deductive implication, there's no inference necessary. He must want to allow for at least one of those 11 things.
Yep.
And so the question should be being asked, which one of those do you want? And what you will find is, by the exact dynamic that Wokal just described, that question will not be asked. So the way that you build up that resentment is that you point out that that question will not be asked and will not be answered. This is a question that we all deserve an answer to, because we literally functionally have a deliberate step. It wasn't like we crept there and then, oh my gosh, Trump issues the order and we step back from it. We now have a intentional, deliberate step to enable one or more of those 11 things. And it can't be that he's just opening the field for diversity training because Section 10. He's just opening the door for education. No, because Section 10. He deliberately has made a move toward literally institutionalizing systemic racism in the federal government. It has to, or sexism, I suppose. You could get around racism by having sexism instead. That's what it bans, is those two things. And so the question, which of those things has to be asked? And it won't be asked. And if it gets asked by a conservative journalist, most of the conservative journalists have rolled over and they don't even try this same game because they know they don't have media hegemony. But if that question gets asked, it won't get answered. It won't get answered.
Well,
he'll lie.
It is answered because he not only rescinded that executive order, he implemented a positive order under the heading of equity. And they define equity as equality for all individuals. And then they use the word including, and then they make a stack. They make this progressive stack. So all individuals, especially, and then they make that stack. So but there is favoritism that's going on.
There is favoritism, but he doesn't say which one of those things that he wants to open the door to, right? And people need to be made aware that we have now had a deliberate step toward making the first intentionally, systemically, or institutionally racist administration that we've had since Johnson in the 1960s. First deliberate step toward that since the 1960s. And that nobody will hold them to account for taking that step. And that is where you start to generate that way, what the hell's going on here attitude.
And I think, what the hell?
I had this weird, I've been pretty black-pilled in the last few days. And
we need to reel you back. We need back to the gray, James. Back to the gray.
I now have this weird wash of hope as I started to realize that since it's now been confirmed on all the levels that they are in possession of hegemony, that the toolbox just got real big.
That's
and
right.
All those tools that we've been trying, people who are dissident to woke have been trying to say, no, they're hegemonic. No, so therefore it applies the other way. No, we can do this. No, we have to be able to say this. They are the ones with the oppressive power. According to their own theory, only somebody with hegemonic and political power can oppress. Guess who that is? Now the proof is in the pudding. And I think because one other reliable rule of the left is that they're absolutely going to overplay their hand every time they get a hand, is that people are going to see it and realize it very quickly. And so by appropriating their dissident literature and hopefully doing so in a way that maintains principle, we can start to build that coalition that you're talking about and point out to people why they should join that coalition. I do still maintain, however, that the respectability politics crowd is not the place to look to build that coalition. They aren't ready.
I'll do you another one. So, as someone who's conservative, I mean, in Canada, I'm conservative. I'd be a moderate Democrat probably in the States, or a moderate Republican. I'd be very Romney-esque in the States.
I don't think you'd be a Democrat, given that they're off the rails and you're only on other rails.
Well, I might be a JFK Democrat, if you want to put it that way.
Shooting the moon.
I am the same place where the media goalposts are, on rails. Okay. So if you want to say we don't know where it started, a lot of conservatives have said, it was Bork, the Bork, the Bork, the Bork, the Bork. Yeah, was.
What's the Bork?
Robert Bork. Robert Bork was a conservative jurist who in 1984 was enlisted by Ronald Reagan to sit on the Supreme Court. And Republicans said, we really don't want this. So there was a quote given in the New York Times, and I can't remember who it was by, but I can't remember who the journalist was, but one of the leading Democrats at the time said, well, we could do one of two things. We could have a careful conversation with him about constitutional meaning and interpretation, and then we'll lose. So they didn't do that. What they did is they engaged in the single in one of the largest, if not the largest, character assassinations in history. They said that a Robert Bork's America would have women dying in the back alley because of abortions, and that black men wouldn't be able to sit at the lunch counter with white people. That's what they said. It was on the well of the Senate, and that speech was written for Ted Kennedy by Joe Biden. Now.
Oh.
Yeah. Joe Biden helped write
Juicy.
that speech. Yeah.
Juicy Joe.
So conservatives trace it back to that. They did everything to Bork. They were like, they stole his video records from the local video rental place because they were hoping to catch him watching something that would offend conservatives. Probably porn, I think, is what they were looking for, but something certainly rated R that conservatives wouldn't like. They went through his trash. They went so heavy on him that when he worked at I believe it was the University of Chicago, he had to eat alone because no one wanted to be seen with him. That's what they did to his reputation. It was conservatives never forgot that, and that's part of why you're seeing such vengeance on the Supreme Court. And we could go all the list down of that, but instead of going over the sins of Democrats, let's go over the sins of some certain Republicans. Reagan had a large number of aides, and one of those aides was a guy named Ed Rollins. And Ed Rollins hired a guy named Lee Atwater. Now, Lee Atwater had years before been running for the head of the college Republicans against one Karl Rove. Okay, those two guys knew each other. They had separate paths. They got separated, but they were both in politics. And Ed Rollins hired Lee Atwater. And Lee Atwater became a strategist. Okay. Lee Atwater eventually became George H.W. Bush's campaign manager, and they ran a very famous ad called the Willie Horton ad. And the Willie Horton ad basically suggested, or outright suggested through imagery, that Michael Dukakis was it Dukakis he was running against? I think it was going to enact legislation that was going to let all the felons out of jail. But he played the race card hard because it was a revolving door of people going through it, and they had one guy who was big and he was black. And when he walked through, they slowed it down and they had him look up at the camera, and you can see him make eye contact with the camera, and he's the only guy that does it. And what they were playing off of is there was a particularly brutal crime where a guy named Willie Horton committed a really brutal, I believe it was rape and murder. And it captured kind of for its brutality. It was, if it bleeds, it leads. And that was all over the news. And Lee Atwater said, we're going to play the race card hard. And so they just went straight with racism, is what they did. And at the time, it was a bit of a scandal. Had that ad been made today, it would have been sent shockwaves through all quarters. It was one of the most brutal ads that was ever made. When Lee Atwater died, he told everyone that he changed his life around. He died at 41. He was very young. He died from cancer. And he told everyone else that he had turned his life around, that life was new, that the world was different, that he was a new man, a different person, and that he had found God and found the Lord. Ed Rollins, who originally hired him, tells the story that when they went looking through his stuff after his death, the Bible was wrapped in cellophane. That's who Lee Atwater was. Lee Atwater's chief and most foremost political protege is Rick Wilson, one of the founders of the Lincoln Project. In 2002, it was 2002, there was a Senate race in Georgia between Max Cleland and Saxby Chambliss. Max Cleland was a tri-amputee. He lost both legs and an arm in Vietnam. And the Republicans, under the guidance of one Rick Wilson, ran an ad that visually compared Max Cleland to Osama bin Laden, put their pictures next to each other, and said, Max Cleland does not have the courage to lead. He was a tri-amputee. This is the very same Rick Wilson who got all inflamed and off the cuff when Donald Trump insulted the Gold Star mom. Yeah, he said a triple amputee didn't have the courage to lead because he wouldn't vote with at the time, George W. Bush's politics.
Jesus.
The ad was so vicious and so utterly brutal that at the time John McCain refused to campaign with Saxby Chambliss. Okay? It's one of the most vicious ads. On Twitter, Rick Wilson has defended this ad by saying, I didn't say anything false. Well, Rick, you said that a war vet missing 2 legs and an arm, didn't have the courage to lead. But he's got more courage than you, right? This is the Lincoln Project, right? Okay. Going forward from that same administration, the Bush administration, got up and said, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. Does everyone remember that speech? Okay. It was one of the most brutal speeches I've ever heard in my life. Imagine being this. You're an American, and you're told that if you don't agree with the Bush administration, you are on the side of terrorism. Yeah. That was what they were running. Okay? Yeah. So...
same shit that Antifa does now, or all the left does now. You're either with us or against us.
This is absolutely brutal grievance cultural politics.
Yes, yeah.
And it's coming and being orchestrated by Lee Atwater, Karl Rove, and Rick Wilson. I mean, the only thing that Max Cleland said he wanted in an interview, he said, look, I'm not saying we can't have funding for the Iraq war. All I'm saying is I want to make sure that we're funding it properly and that we're not getting off the handle, right? That's what he said. I mean, that's a conservative fiscal position. On Iraq, a Vietnam War vet with conservative fiscal positions, isn't that what we want? And yet Rick Wilson compares him to Osama bin Laden. It was a brutal ad. I have it. We don't need to watch it right now, but I have it. Just in case Mr. Wilson wants to say otherwise.
Yeesh. So
those guys have poured grievance politics and poison into the Republican Party for years. If you look at the things they said about Muslims, if you look at the things that they said about every single group, anyone who crossed them, absolutely brutal politics. Someone recently told a story about how Mitch Daniels was going to run, and John Weaver, who was recently ousted from the Lincoln Project for using his position to sexually harass young men, even though he's married, John Weaver worked with another group to basically say that they had dirt on Mitch Daniels' wife, and they were going to destroy her if he ran. So he pulled back and pulled out. Mitch Daniels is one of the most decent men in politics, on the Republican side at least. Those guys have been pouring poison into the water of Republican politics for decades. The guys who run the Lincoln Project have 6 wives between them, and the only guy who's still married to the woman he was his first wife, I believe, is John Weaver, and he just, just got kicked out of the project for sexual harassment. Those guys have been absolutely brutal. So, I mean, Republicans point to Democrats, but there's a lot of Republicans that we get to point at. The only problem is with all those Republicans, they've all joined up with the Lincoln Project because it's not their version of brutality that's being foisted upon us right now. Steve Schmidt did pro-Trump hits in 2016 and 2015 trying to land himself a job, right? I mean, it's absolutely brutal, the hypocrisy of the Lincoln Project and what they're doing. So I think that James is right. That kind of politics, too, like we don't want a woke politics, but we also don't want brutal, dishonest, hypocritical politics either. And it's not worth it to us. Like, I mean, if we're going to be good people, anyone who's associated with the Lincoln Project, anyone who wants to associate themselves with a guy who called Max Cleland a coward and then laughed about it on Twitter years later, is not somebody we want to be joining up with either. And I think that's something we need to be aware of.
That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about Trumpism, is that on the right, a lot of Trumpism was actually a visceral reaction against that.
Yeah.
It was a visceral reaction against that aspect of the Republican Party. And so, again, these are the same kind of people who are touting respectable opinions and just staying within a range of respectability that they get to demarcate. Which is why I don't necessarily think that whatever coalition gets built, to kind of circle back to what that's about, I don't think it has to be populist. But it does have to be outside of it has to start outside of the orbits. if it's going to be truly grassroots, it's got to start outside of the orbits that are these kind of like big, gnarly political players, both in the sense of being kind of the cultural political players with the respectable opinions on the left. That's where I call them very smart people. And then these nasty political players on the right.
Yeah.
Which is why I made the axe. That's why I made that meme. It's not enough to be not Republican. You have to be anti-Republican. It's actually after that is what I'm going after.
The walk away movement, I think, was the model of the future of politics. And when I first saw it, and I know that it was mostly walking away from Democrats and still was, but just seeing individuals, normal people. And I actually, when I saw that, I saw the vision of my channel. The politics starts with conversation. Politics starts with the personal is political in a way. You don't take politics and make everything in your life political in the Twitter sense, but it's about coming into contact with the populace, with the people. Mm-hmm. Walkaway movement, unfortunately, got kicked off, which is a great stain and sin on these companies that have no care for actually our politics, being Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, etc. Lays the groundwork, and it needs to be a walk toward. There needs to be a walk toward some sort of channel or estuary, again, that brings people toward an ocean, toward a larger body. And I think that there's corruption in all of the politics. There's, like you outlined, Wokal, there's corruption in the Democrats, there's corruption in the Republicans, there's nasty players in the Republicans that have been doing nasty things and getting away with murdering hundreds of thousands of people through wars. And then there's the nasty shit in the Democratic Party, what we see being played out over the last year. That aside, I think that what is going to save the country has to be coalition building, and building that on personal relationships that have the breadth of different viewpoints and the breadth of humor and mockery and fun, joviality.
That should be the side of postmodernism, where we did our postmodern Jedi talk before. Postmodernism should be fun. The play aspect is great. Bring the play back. Yeah. Like, play with ideas, get silly, get fun, tear down stuff that's too stuffy and dodgy, for sure. And I agree with you, actually. I absolutely agree. And that the personal relationship coalition building, where we're becoming friends with one another, we're having dialogue with one another, we're sitting down, we're breaking bread when the freaking COVID's over now, right? They changed the test, just like Trump said. If you change the test, then the numbers will go down. The inauguration happened. They changed the test. So now the numbers will go down. And now they're saying that Fauci said today it hit a plateau and it's going to be over by May. Wow. Amazing. Wow. I know.
Great timing, COVID.
It's amazing how COVID is the most magic virus ever. And so, but when we can
designed in a lab to change the American political landscape.
Yeah. And to boost the Chinese economy with no other. See, that's the other thing. We mentioned Biden and Obama, and that it's not Russia. They didn't name who the real issue is, but we're not supposed to say who it is, I suppose.
No.
We can't tell people it's China.
No.
I'd be wrong. So that's one of my great things is that you got these guys on, who are saying we want to bring back, and they whitewash. Well, we played hardball politics. No, you guys played the most poisonous politics of personal destruction that anyone ever saw in their entire life.
You're talking about the
Democrats
conservatives
too.
Yeah, the establishment politics.
All of them.
Well, the Democrats can do it with just straight easy nuclear weapons of calling everybody a racist.
Yeah. Now they're going to play it. Yeah. It's ugly and it's gross and people are getting tired of it. Maybe I could ask this question.
The walk toward has got to be anti-gatekeeping, though.
That axe is for gates. Okay.
This is my axe.
Gates.
Okay, so we have some books that I need to show.
Sorry.
This is a primer on postmodernism by Stanley Grenz.
That's good.
Where he in 1993 predicted the rise of postmodernism. although he didn't quite see it becoming as intersectional as it is today. This is the Rebel Cell. People need to read this book. This will tell you exactly what happened between, say, 1950 and 2002, the protest movement. That sort of the system, man, and the corporations, man, they just want everyone to conform, dude. Like that kind of thing, which just died about 8 years ago. That was the precursor to all of this, right? Don't buy this book, but you could see it. Feminism, Postmodernism. This is early feminist postmodernism, which I have. And it is Nancy Fraser, Sandra Harding, Feminism, Science, and the Anti-Enlightenment Critiques.
Shit.
Nancy Hartstock, Donna Haraway, Judith Butler.
No, that's unreadable.
Oh,
is it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would be unreadable, actually.
And Beautiful Trouble. People need. I can't stress enough how much.
Is that a hammer on the cover?
It is it's a hammer, but look at what it is. It's a hammer that's also
a megaphone.
A megaphone.
Yeah.
Right?
Mediocrity with a megaphone.
So you've got books, and I have an axe.
Wait,
That's
you have
right.
a book too, James. Plug your book.
Which
you
books?
do. You should
Hold
plug.
on,
Well, yeah, which book?
I have to put the axe down.
Well,
It's a real axe.
it is.
You know, Nietzsche had a philosophizing with the hammer. James has philosophizing with an axe.
So yeah, I have this book, which
That's
lots
beautiful.
of
Theories.
I
It's the
love
greatest non-selling, the greatest best-selling non-best-selling novel in history.
James.
Yeah,
can
I mean,
ask you,
it was best-selling everywhere but the New York Times, which is really interesting.
How did that
great feat.
turn out? Did you? I don't mean to pry, but Jordan Peterson sold 8 million copies of 12 Rules for Life. Have you hit the 8 million copy mark yet?
Not that many.
Okay.
Oh, no.
No, it's doing really well.
Did you go gold?
Nowhere near that well. I
Do
don't
you
know
have a
what
gold record?
platinum and gold are. I don't have any records.
No,
I
I
do
mean-
have another book though.
Oh.
I did not. I don't know if it's hit 6 figures yet, but it's right around there.
Oh,
in
good.
terms of
Okay.
sales. And it's still skyrocketing. It's still like in the top 1,000 on Amazon, which is actually pretty surprising. So I have this book too.
How to Have Impossible Conversations. Very practical guide.
Yeah, it's a very practical
Including
guide.
the Bogosian maneuver.
It has
right?
it has the full Bogosian in it. You can ask him what that is. No, I actually, interestingly enough, I had a conversation with a pretty hardcore right wing guy recently, and I ended up like he said stuff that freaked me out. I'm like, oh god, and so I went straight into stuff out of the book, and we ended up having a very productive dialogue about our political differences and a very productive dialogue about our religious differences, which he was pretty absolutist about in both cases, but we were still able to have quite the interesting conversation. And I feel like it was a very successful, if as Pete would phrase it, intervention. I don't know if it changes his perspective at all, but we did have, very successful open dialogue across a profound and somewhat horrifying, in my opinion, difference of opinion. And so I do think that apparently the book kind of works. The ideas in it are really good. I was just started asking kind of not opening like opener, like pickup artist opener, but like questions that open up the field of dialogue about what was being said. And, very open-ended questions and kind of letting him explore and say, don't you see that maybe creates a conflict with this other thing or with that? And it's useful. So if we're going to start building coalitions across left, right, center, all of whom I think have to be red-pilled and not gatekeeping and not cutthroat politics, then I think that it's a useful book. I mean, I'm proud to have participated in it. It did also, by the way, get mentioned on my Wikipedia entry. I have a Wikipedia entry now. And when it first came out, I had much Wikipedia activism. Oh, God, Benjamin. It was so funny. It was so funny. So there's a person, and I won't name the person, but the person is well known for being dedicated to their activism against people they don't like. And so this person included on my Wikipedia entry when it first came out that I am known for having written this book.
Yes.
And very hypocritically also making your mom jokes on Twitter. which became the funniest thing in the entire possible, universe that you could imagine. That they said that I make your mom jokes, and that was on my Wikipedia entry. I was so happy. And then that sparked even more Wikipedia activism, to where eventually Wikipedia claimed, my own Wikipedia entry for a day or two, claimed that I have gigantic brass balls, which I thought was also fantastic. I'm so happy. This is the kind of postmodernism I live for.
Yeah.
My own
Did
you see it when it said that? I have a screenshot. I can show you.
Let's do.
Okay, this is my book.
What is this?
It's called Anwa Son of Adam, and
okay,
it starts at the beginning.
Green screen is kind of screwing it up a little bit.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
maybe I'll fix
it's sort of
that
excitingly got shadow. It's like it's shadow energy.
No, it does. It's all about the shadow of the will, of the will to power.
I didn't know you had a book. I want to read that now.
I have many books, but this is the only one that I have available for public consumption. It's on Amazon, and it's a epic poem, so it's not going to be read by anybody. There's a lot of gatekeeping in here. I gatekeep all my ideas, and I host people with their own.
I
don't know if that's going to get.
Edit this one line out, because I don't know if I'm allowed to tell people. I have a book contract as well.
Okay,
but don't.
You can tell people that. I'm sure.
Tell people.
Yeah,
don't make me do more work than I already have to do, Wokal.
I don't know if I just don't know if I'm allowed to tell.
Just say you're writing a book. What's it about?
You are.
I am writing a book, and it's going to be about postmodernism and liberalism, and how to fight against in a postmodern world, how to fight for liberalism. Because that's going to be something that I think is really important. I think
people should know about that. You definitely can say that.
Yeah. Well, now we know. You've got the scoop, Mr. Boyce.
By the end of the year, when do we expect it out?
I don't have a date for it yet. It's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
So
tell me about
we're giving her, but it'll be good. It'll be it will give people the knowledge and tactics to be able to fight against wokeness.
And what? Lot?
I have a question for both of you, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to think.
Okay.
When the history of the Saskatchewan Party in because that's where I'm from.
I don't know anything about Canadian history. I don't want to disappoint you.
No,
okay.
You're not.
I didn't even know Saskatchewan was a place until today.
I know you guys have toques there.
In our province.
I went to Bible college in Saskatchewan. Fun fact.
Where?
Prince Albert. Way up there.
Do they have
Prince Albert Bible Institute?
That's where I got mine.
You're Prince Albert?
So we played against them in sports. Because all the little Bible colleges in Saskatchewan play against each other. That's
all
hilarious.
7 people are on all the teams.
That's right. That's right. We used to dominate in indoor soccer. We had a couple of years where we dominated because we had a bunch of Japanese exchange students.
What?
We had like 6 Japanese exchange students for whatever reason, and they were just deadly. Just deadly. Just give the ball to Nobunari. He'll take care of the rest.
Look what you've done, Benjamin.
Okay.
I love it.
Oh.
I averted like the pop.
Okay, so what happened is between 1944 and 2007, they won 13 out of 17 possible elections. We had 3 parties, the NDP, which is the far left party, that's the New Democrats. Then we had the Liberals and the Conservatives. And the Liberals were kind of centristy, and the Conservatives were moderate conservative party. The Conservatives won 2 elections, the Liberals won 2 elections, and the NDP won everything else. In 1991, the Conservatives got completely blown out of the water. They were gone. And so proceeded 16 years of unmitigated NDP rule. And at a certain point, the Liberals and the Conservatives, people say, like, you can't just keep vote splitting because the Liberals will get 30, and then the Conservatives will get 30, and then the NDP will get 40, and then they get the seat, right? Because it's first past the post.
Yeah.
Or it'll be 25, 25, 50. People are like, we don't know what to do. So, in 1997, 4 MPs from the Liberal Party and 4 MPs from the Conservative Party fused and formed the Saskatchewan Party. This is the deal that they made. Okay? At the time, They said, okay, the liberals said we're not willing to give up single payer, and we're not willing to give up our social services. So those have continued to grow. And in exchange, the conservatives said, okay, but we get to put in our economic policies, and we will have a détente on social issues, and we will follow the federal government's recommendations, whatever those may be.
Yeah.
Since then, they've had 4 straight majority governments, all of them landslides. The first one was maybe not a landslide, but they've won out of the 62 seats. They've got 51, I think, or 49. And then they had 49 out of 60, and then 48 out of 60 in the 3 elections. They've been in power since 2007. I think that's a model for what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think the model is you've got to sacrifice the long-term political goals of your individual side for the shorter-term political goal of keeping the nutcases out of power.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the same way that Goldwater turned the Republican Party in the 1960s into a vehicle for their vision of conservatism, I think we have to take it and turn it into a vehicle of populist moderates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that having people like maybe not John Kasich because of his character and because of the kind of person that he is behind the scenes, but maybe like a John Huntsman character or a Joe Manchin, like a moderate Democrat. I don't know about Tulsi Gabbard, maybe her. I don't know where she sits on things. I don't know if she'd cross to the Republicans or not. I don't think she's far enough to do that, but she might. But to really sit down with people and say, we can get moderates from either side and pull together, and then we can moderate the Conservative Party at the same time while winning power. It will move the country to the right. But if conservatives say, we will take the foreign policy money that we're spending on wars, and we'll take it and we'll reinvest it into schools in inner cities and actually do it, we're throwing the neocons out of the party basically and saying, look, you're done. We're going to give that up. We'll move social issues back to being where they should be. We'll rein in all the critical race theory stuff and the trans stuff. That will be the social thing. We'll give that to the social conservatives, and we'll say to the social conservatives, look, we're not going to ban gay marriage, but we'll stop the CRT and we'll stop with the radical trans teachings in your schools. We can get rid of that. That'll keep the social conservatives happy. And then for the rest of us, we can have efficient markets with slight interventions where they're needed. And I think that a policy platform of moderation like that, I think that could win big. And I think that we could pull people in if we wanted to go that direction. I think that's a really wise way to go about it. You'd need statesmen to come in. You'd need to get people on board to do it. You're going to have to get, some of those moderates to put their egos aside, and you'll have to tell some of the libertarians, sorry, nope. Sorry, Mike Lee, we're not doing that. But we're going to put society back in order, and you can be part of it, and you can be the economic conscience of the party, raising the alarm over certain things. You can still fulfill that role. You can have the left libertarians join in and be the social conscience on things like criminal justice reform and things like that. But you do it from a moderate perspective, not in line with the dictates of CRT or critical theory. I think a party like that could go gangbusters.
I
just don't know how. I mean, how would you guys, do you think that there could be room for that? And do you think that there's the kind of people, I know Brett wants to use his Unity 2020 thing. I know he wanted to go that route, but the woman who got that canceled off of Twitter and got Twitter to throw them off is involved with the Lincoln Project, right?
Oh, really? Came from the Lincolns.
Yeah.
Fucking bastards.
taking the axe of, right?
Oh, yeah. No, that was George Washington that cut down the apple tree.
No, Lincoln fought with sticks and all kinds of crazy shit, though. Lincoln was a beast.
He was tall.
He was tall.
That's true. So I don't know, what do you guys?
No, I think that's legit.
How do you step toward that?
I think you actually outlined how it gets stepped toward. Is first, there is already a broad growing consensus that doing something populist and moderate to throw the nutcases out of power is very popular. there are characters who are very popular around that sort of message. And if they can be recruited to being, I know that in fact something like this on the right is trying to come into existence under the branding the Patriot Party, and so which is trying to basically rebrand MAGA. And if, like I said, I mean, the party could be, shouldn't be, but it could, for all purposes, be called a Red Pill Party, which is, it shouldn't be called that, obviously, but that's the essential characteristic.
Not be called that. Whoever's listening, don't call it that.
It should be called like the American Party or something like that.
That's
just like
right.
The Saskatchewan
That's
Party.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
The American Party.
Yeah, which normally would have been a taken for granted thing. But I think that there's a lot of possibility and a lot of energy behind something like that. And what you said is correct, is that the people who are willing to do that would have to both be willing to come to the table and say, here are things that we traditionally have fought like cats and dogs for. And we recognize that that's a conversation that we can get back to if we get the nutcases out of power and can stabilize the polity. And at that point, we can go back to our arguments about whatever it is. Some of the huge wedge issues that have driven very deeply, for example, would be abortion. And abortion, like the compromise position, is what we were doing before everybody got insane about it, which is safe, legal, and rare. And so certainly, I think you would find that most moderate people on both sides of the aisle are willing to agree to something like safe, legal, and rare. And then the other points that you actually raised are quite clear. Like, let's see what we can do. I mean, what are they generally saying is that if you go, I forget which way it goes, slightly left socially and slightly right fiscally, or it's the other way around, it's extremely popular. People who know these things and pay attention to politics, remember, I'm apolitical, would know what that is. But to bring that to the table with a spirit of compromise and saying, yeah, we're going to sacrifice this, and this to this degree. Here's the bright line that we won't go past. What have you got? And to hash that out in a kind of a council of Elrond or whatever, and build the thing. The energy behind that thing would be the thing that the tech monsters, and it's not, we say the tech monsters, Jack Dorsey and I've even more, I think Zuckerberg, while they do have strong beliefs regarding woke type issues, I think are mostly under the pressure of being up against the New York Times and Harvard and the cathedral, as Curtis Yarvin called it. That's sort of this fusion between all of these big establishment players. And so the cathedral will go after them through the tech companies. But that would be the thing that I think people could rally against, or rally within to rally against these manipulations of power, and then to start consolidating both resources and money. And most importantly, as much as I hate to say it, but the name of the game right now in politics is to rally the princes. Who are the princes? The princes, you got three kind of groups of princes. Princes are billionaires and other families of large finances and influence. And what are they doing? They're either woke, they're anti-woke, or they're somewhere lost in the middle. And the goal would be to recruit as many of them into this kind of middle ground as possible. And the anti-woke and the middle ground people would be a natural alliance very easily. But it would be to convince them that the woke is a frightening thing and that it is generating nutcases on the other side who are a equally frightening thing, and that moderation is necessary, or else we're going to see massive other problems. And there are other dimensions of that problem, and I know there are people working on those in dealing with the kind of ultra rich and influential that are above my pay grade. But certainly that would be kind of the main initial operations of such an endeavor, would be to bring such people together, and also to bring to the table as many of these significant families of influence, none of whom I'll name presently. Well, I'll name two people of influence who I think are in the one of whom you would agree, and one of whom you would probably be surprised to hear me name, who are people of major influence in finance that are actually in the undecided camp in the middle, one of which is Elon Musk, which I think is an obvious, and the other is actually Jeff Bezos. I don't think Bezos is woke. Yep. I think that Bezos is he doesn't know what else to do. And so given proper direction, he would become a massive asset for a middle of the road party. And those two people right there alone are like basically numbers 1 and 2. I don't think we're going to get people like Bill Gates to come to the table, but maybe. There are other people, though, that are certainly right-wing financiers who would be more than willing to sit down at such a meeting.
Yeah.
I really think that it comes down to a national story and empowering, especially. I need to go back into how America was formed and what were the conditions that led to those ideas that led us forward. And looking at those conditions, and I really do think, though meritocracy gets a bad rap for very bad reasons, the way to empower all these different communities, we need to cut woke to the chase and say, look, they're promising you victim status. You get very narrow amounts of power from that, and you have to operate within their rules if you want their power. Mm-hmm. Don't you want to build your own equity? You want the government to give you equity? You're giving them your responsibility for yourself. Build your own equity. So we need to return. I don't know what I sound like. I sound like some sort of throwback, but I think we really need to return to what made America work. And if we get back to that, all this postmodern, all this media stuff, it's a game, and it will dissolve back into a game if people are earning and making things out of their own labor and returning the power back to the individual and shooting down all of those different identity politics from gender to race, just leveling the playing field and also respecting the history and really doing really good by the actions of America and show where America went wrong. And so we can learn from our mistakes and not hate America, but incorporate the shadow.
The 1776 commission that he put together, or the Trump put together, even though I think that the step into blah, 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 patriotic
That's dangerous.
Is a
well,
misstep.
It's stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that understanding, you could even call it the warts and all project, right? Because that's a phrase that people use. It's like, let's just tell the story of America.
The Red Pill Party and the warts and all project, James. You're pumping out some really memeable, horrible ideas.
No, really, it's already there. I got an axe. We're gonna call it what I said.
No, I'm not arguing. It was a compliment. I'm just saying I don't want it to be called that, but that's what it is. And
it is, though. Somebody who's good at marketing can come up with that word. I don't know what that word is. I know what the idea should be. And it should be this kind of brutal honesty without being like grotesquely indulgent into the ugly stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the reckoning is there. And then there's no like, oh, you're whitewashing it or whatever. And it becomes the opportunity. And I said this, I visited the National Archive last year in March, and I came out of there and I said, there's an opportunity here to tell the story of America in its true form and to tell it as a story of triumph over the worst aspects of human tribalism and nature. And that story should actually be like what I just recently released a thing, and I've been saying it on Twitter, that we're seeing the attempt to forge a new national mythology.
Yes.
That means the old national mythology has, in a sense, died, and the new one's garbage. It's utter garbage. And so a more compelling national mythology, which is more brutally honest about our history without being indulgent into this trash victimology narrative, I think would be extremely resonant in such an environment. People are dying for that story. And to see a commission of historians, much like what the 1776 commission could have been, its ideal form, is for admitting that story and putting that story to film where it moves people, for example, would be a brilliant thing to see come into existence.
Yeah, the triumph narrative. That's our heroic arc. That's where we go. We look at the weight and we lean into the problem, And I think that all the problems of wokeness and all of this theory, all this existential threat to the fabric of being just able to communicate because everything's power now, you lean into the disparities and you lift everybody out. But we lift it together. It's the difference between servitude and civil service.
I'd vote for you.
The initiative comes from, let's not go into politics.
I'm voting for you anyway.
I'm voting. I can't vote for James because he can't run up here. But if he did come up here and become a Canadian citizen, he could run for office because you don't have to be a Canadian to be prime minister.
Oh,
I don't.
Does that
the next Justin Trudeau?
Trudeau, James Doe.
James Doe.
True James.
True James.
I need to feed the cats. You guys want to wrap it up with?
Drink is what you need after this crap.
You need a drink.
I do need a drink. It's 9:00 now.
Yeah,
it's 8:00 here. We did 3 hours.
We did.
That's like Rogan style.
No, this is very Rogan. You guys help me. I don't do Rogan, but you guys gave me the it's like a Viagra pill. You guys are like you guys kept me going. Plowing the fields, planting the seeds in that fertile soil. Axing the fences.
Axing the fences. Yeah, the fences. That's right.
Smart people. James has got it out. Thanks for explaining smart people because you've been saying
very smart people.
Very VSPs.
Very smart people. That's right. Yeah. Very VSPs. It sounds like a bad brandy.
I was encouraged. Today when Andrew Sullivan said that liberalism folded like a tent in the wind. I responded by saying liberalism folded like Superman on laundry day.
That's right. I saw that.
I like that. I like the pun.
I was encouraged though that he sees it. You know, I was encouraged that he gets that this is not end, because I think that some people say, aha, the craziness is over now, and they're gonna like lay down, and then they're gonna start seeing like everywhere, like
boys beating the hell out of your girls on the football field.
I have someone close to me in my life who's all in on this, and I'm exposed to well, not exposed, but I get a steady diet of, well, anyone can be any gender and you're just this, and I just kind of go like, man, if you understood, because you can't like explain, but I am working on the ability to do a masterclass of postmodernism, masterclass style thing where we go through it with we'll do Derrida, then we'll do Foucault, then we'll do Baudrillard, then we'll do Lyotard.
Excellent.
And we'll just teach it. And I'm not sure exactly how to do the setup yet because I do best in front of a crowd when I have people to read and go off of, but we'll see. And just to explain and show people, like, you've treated the world as if it was Legos, and you can just take it and put it together however you want, when really it's more like a garden or like a tree. And if you take it apart, it dies. You can't do it that way, right?
Yep.
So I feel
you should open a daycare in your house and then practice on the 5-year-olds. Get the ELI5 down and then build up, because everybody operates best when they're thinking in 5-year-old mode.
Well, I mean, yeah. So here's one for you. Do you guys know who Jeffrey Bennington is?
Mm-hmm. James knows things. I don't.
Jeffrey Bennington is a professor of literature at Emory University. He's like the foremost exponent of Derrida. He's very good in French, by the way. Bennington is. He was trained at Oxford, but he's a postmodernist. He was giving a talk, and he's known to be like the foremost. He did a book where he explicated all of Jacques Derrida's philosophy, and then Derrida. That's the top 2/3 of the page of the book are him explicating Derrida's philosophy, and then underneath is Derrida commenting on that. And the point being, of course, that Derrida's philosophy can never be fully explicated, because then you could take Derrida's philosophy, right? I mean, it's very postmodern, right? By the way, Bennington's contribution, that top 2/3, is called Derrida-base. Just
like a code.
Yeah, or like a database.
Language. Yeah, yeah.
It's like readable Derrida.
Yeah. Bennington has given some fantastic lectures, which I'm going to borrow from when I teach about what Derrida says. It is amazing the extent to which people don't, or the way that he was abused, right? The way his philosophy, like he was wrong, like he's bad enough as it is, but like the bastardized version of him is even worse.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I was watching him do a talk on, it was actually on critical theory. And he said, he was asked a question, is theory critical? And then there was another question about like, going forward, should critical theory be da 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 da? And so he, of course, gets up and says, critical theory first taught me that we have to, ask questions of the question itself. And so he, of course, deconstructs the question, right? Why the management speak going forward? Why not regular humans speak today, or journalists speak in the future, or historians speak, blah, blah, whatever. He made a comment. He said, as my master Jean-François Lyotard said, I don't want to be a hero who's come to save the world by reminding it of the meaning it's lost. Which taught me two things. One is his master, his Sith Lord, is Jean-François Lyotard. And the second thing is that they don't want to bring back the meaning of the world. They want to leave it deconstructed. And they think it's a good idea.
They want the world to end in that missing scene. Just, it's all missing. It's gone. This is the void. Just that writing prompt. No continuation. No utopia.
All right.
But make no mistake, there will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the election against the United States.
I got an axe.
You do. You do have
I've actually got two of them.
I love that you bring a phallus to every conversation.
Axes are phallic.
That's a new axe.
It is a new axe.
Is it brand new?
I mean, it's a training axe, so it hasn't really seen any action other than swinging it around. So it's like I tweeted today, for context, that somebody said that I needed a therapist, and I said that I did get a therapist for a while, and the therapist didn't believe my stories. And then eventually, when she did believe my stories, said I need a more qualified therapist. And I said, fuck it, and started teaching myself to fight with an axe instead. And I did.
That's amazing.